Yeah. Hey. Hi, everybody. I think we're live. Let's see. Did you check YouTube? Yeah, sure. Hi, guys. We're live. This is a very special edition of, I don't know, it's not an edition of anything. This is just a first, it's a special event kind of thing. This is a roundtable. I am Drew Grant, your host here with Eric, aka NerdChronic from the movie trivia Schmoedown. With us, we also have Lon Harris.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Sabrina Ramirez.
Hi, guys.
And Aaron.
Hello. One of these 5 doesn't belong here, but thank you.
Yeah, one person only has one name. We're going to be talking about a movie that there's just so much to unpack, so I want to just kind of dive right in. We're going to be talking about Charlie Kaufman's latest film. It's on Netflix called I'm Thinking of Ending Things. Yeah. So I don't know what that sound was. I'm assuming you guys have all seen the film. Hopefully, we are going to be discussing it in detail. So if anybody in the comments should know that ahead of time. We also have the Streamlabs open. So that's streamlabs.com/VideoDrew. It is Sabrina's birthday. Yeah. So everyone can wish happy birthday to Sabrina. Hey. We're very glad that she decided to spend her birthday discussing such a upbeat and happy, life-affirming film as this is.
You know, it totally doesn't add to the existential dread of just like her. I'm 23 and I'm in the spring of my life and we're in the middle of a pandemic.
You're young for existential dread. This is tragic. You shouldn't even be watching this movie for another 10 years.
Hey, I've had it since I was 13.
Marathon.
Yeah. I don't even think the characters in their iteration that we see them in as a young couple are 23. I think that we place them in their like mid-30s. So you're not even
the dancing couple is it's close.
So it just gets worse from here. Is that what you guys are saying?
No, it's better. Your 40s are going to be great. Trust me. We're really good.
That's the bottom line.
Yeah. That's dark. Okay, so we got a bunch of happy birthdays, by the way, from David McKay, from Pardis, from Matthew Dosen. Gonna get through them all. So guys, if Drew's catching Pokemon, what does that mean?
Yeah.
The hat.
Yeah, got it.
Every time I see that hat.
I was like, what does that mean? But I was wearing a hat. So before we dive in, like real quick, I got really excited to see this movie. Sabrina actually reminded me when I saw your post about it that like Charlie Kaufman had made a new film. He directed my favorite film of all time, being John Malkovich, and has done a couple others that I really love. His one right before this, I believe, was Synopsis, New York, right? Or
Synopsis,
but
Anomalisa, New York.
Anomalisa, of course, Anomalisa, which was great. I saw that in theaters, but I wasn't the hugest fan. I would like to go back and revisit Synopsis with this as a companion piece. But going into it, like, what were you guys' feelings about seeing this film? Like, what do you guys kind of bring in terms of Charlie Kaufman love?
Yeah, well, my favorite movie of all time is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and we know obviously he wrote the screenplay for that one. And I've always just admired his work and kind of the person that he is and his creative mind. And RB3 and I actually made a video talking about our most anticipated films of 2020 back last December, and this was my number one. So it's been at the forefront of my mind for the longest time. I've been like waiting when the dropped. I don't love to watch trailers too much, but I just had to get that little piece of it. So I was really, really excited, and I liked that it was being added to Netflix. So it's kind of accessible for anybody who wants to watch it. If you have an account, technically it's free if you're paying the monthly subscription fee. And I think that's kind of the best way to put it out right now, especially because we don't have theaters. I would have loved to seen this film in a theater. Obviously, the way Netflix releases their films, like Marriage Story, they always get that limited theatrical release, LA, New York. So we would have had that chance. But I mean, other than that, this is probably the best way to see it. So I was going into it super excited. Definitely knew I was in for a ride. Definitely knew that I was going to come out of this with a lot of emotions. So I knew that going into it.
I can ask real quick, since watching it, how many times have you gone back and revisited? Have you rewatched it?
I've rewatched it, I think, like 3 times now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I hit my 3rd replay of it today. So what about you, Aaron? Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Sabrina.
Oh, well, I know, Drew, you said you read the book, and I actually waited. I didn't want to read the book. I wanted the film to kind of be my first experience with it. So I ordered the book. Should be coming in soon. So I'm definitely going to check that out soon as well.
I was thinking, because it was your birthday, I didn't know if it would be creepy enough for me to ask for your address so I could send you a copy of it, because it is based on it's like a novella. It's not that long of a book. So I had a weird experience of going into it where it sort of was like I had this pre-knowledge of it, and I told everyone, I was telling everyone beforehand, I don't think this is going to be filmable. Like I didn't think this could be adaptable. And then I was like, but then again, it's the guy who made Adaptation, and like no one thought The Orchid Thief could be made into like a shoot 'em up film. So like it's I had faith in Charlie Kaufman, but I was really looking forward to seeing how he could film a concept like that is as ephemeral as this film. What about you, Aaron?
Yeah, I love Charlie Kaufman. First of all, everything that he does, I've like. This is as close to like Marvel for me as it gets. I just, and it being on Netflix, I get really excited because Netflix like once or twice a year really. Oh, sorry, I don't want that.
What a panel! Hey, Drew, Eric. Happy birthday, Sabrina. So much delightful on around these days. I heard we have been thinking of you. Glad to see your face. Steve, Heather, and I watched this long weekend.
So that's from movie Fanobi, saying happy birthday and saying everything. Do you like how creepy my Schmoebot is?
Yeah.
Children in the
That's
corner.
haunt me in my sleep. I love it.
Ooh, how did that even happen? I don't remember reprogram. Anyway, go ahead. You were saying, Aaron.
Yeah, I think when it's a super chat, it's a different voice than when it's a streamline.
Got it.
But
love it. Very on brand.
But yeah, I was definitely looking forward to this. Actually, I had totally forgot this was coming out. After like kind of COVID's happened, I just assumed everything I was looking forward to wasn't happening. Mm-hmm. So when this got dropped, I was super excited. I really like watching movies in the morning, like first thing in the morning. With my job, I run my own dog walking company. I don't start till like 11 a.m. and I'm up by 7 a.m. So I usually can watch like 1 or 2 movies before I even go to work. And this was like actually a really great start to my morning because there was so much to unravel for the rest of the day. And I'm really comfortable in these kind of quote unquote like sad thoughts. And I actually, in my initial viewing, I was surprised at how upbeat and funny it was actually, because I think Kaufman's a lot funnier than I think people realize. So that may be this is a movie that you can't help but bring your own personal experience into, which most of his movies are. And that's my favorite kind of movie, favorite kind of filmmaker is a filmmaker that makes it incredibly important on what you bring into the movie. And I mean, it's just like, I totally understand people who hated this movie, people who love this movie. I understand the reactions. I mean, I don't know what movie is for everybody, but this one isn't the one for everybody either.
Maybe it is, and that scares people.
Extreme, like, I mean, like, I really do mean this, like a trigger warning for people if they do have serious issues with relationships or with their mental health stability. I really do mean that with this kind of movie, especially with it being on Netflix. I mean, you're not going to be in a theater around other people. You're alone, and then it ends and Netflix doesn't come in with a trailer. It lets you watch the credits,
which are pretty great.
Yeah, thank you. Like Netflix is actually allowing credits and then there's a little,
there's a little thing at the end, but I kind of want to get into that, and we'll get into that because I do want to dive into what the meaning is of the little thing at the end.
I mean, it exceeded my expectations. I'll say that much, which were extremely high already. I didn't watch any trailers or anything going in. I didn't know anybody other than the main cast members, and that was enough to sell me on it. And I mean, Kaufman is 3 for 3 directing for me for sure. I mean, Anomalisa is incredible, and Anomalisa is just one that the first time I saw it, I was way too young. I was
like 4 years ago, man.
But I feel like in the last few years, like I've had a lot of life experiences that made me, when I revisited it, really appreciate it. Because first time I saw it, I didn't get it at all. So, but anyway.
Way too young. I mean, when it came out, Sabrina was not of drinking age yet. So I feel like that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot happens in 4 or 5 years. A lot happens, especially at my point in life. So I mean, I can hardly have a conversation with myself from 4 years ago now, to be honest.
Well, you can try, and that would sort of be like the crux of maybe what
that would be like this movie, kind of.
What about you, Lon? What's your sort of walking into this? I'm thinking of ending. Oh God, I wish I had a plus.
It's terrible. I know. We were talking about that last night. It needs to have that.
No good. It's not trying to be accessible though, which is maybe a metaphor.
Fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because when I first got into Being John Malkovich, which was the first Kaufman film that I saw, it was very much from like a screenwriting perspective. Like that was like I was trying to be a screenwriter at that point, and that movie is notable because it's really weird and it's really funny, but it's very much conventional screenplay format. Like it doesn't break any of the rules of movie structure and formatting. It just happens to be that the rules are
very
being
weird.
applied to this very odd, surreal story about jumping into people's brains. But otherwise, it's a very conventional movie, and so it was really useful for me because I also wanted to write weird, goofy comedy stuff to sort of look at movies like that how do you both follow the rules but make it feel like this crazy spin on it. And so that was kind of how I used to think of Kaufman. Like he was making these movies that were traditional movies, rom-coms or action thriller type things, but putting this weird, funky spin. And I think that's true of almost all the films he did that were directed by other people like Gondry or Spike Jonze. So it's been really interesting now that he's directing on his own because I feel like he's kind of left that behind. Like Synopsis and Anomalisa, relatively conventional, but they play around with structure a lot. And then this one just kind of blows it up and goes sort of full art film with it. I think that's probably my sense is that's why some people are not. Like, I feel like you put a movie like this on Netflix and a lot of people are like, oh, I've heard of that guy. He wrote Eternal Sunshine. And then they watch this and it's like, no, this is experimental. Yeah. And he's really messing around with the foundational, like this, then this, then this idea of linear narrative. And I think that, especially because it's on Netflix, it's not the sort of thing you have to seek out. It's like right there. And you're like, oh, the guy from Breaking Bad play. And I think that's catching a lot of people by surprise.
Fans interested in the Venn diagram of Eternal Sunshine and the Todd from Breaking Bad.
I mean, like there's enough about it that might grab you. Or it kind of almost, I was thinking it sort of looks like that Garden State image with Zach Braff in the shirt that matches the wallpaper. That Jesse Buckley shot in front of the wallpaper, sort of reminiscent. Like that alone, it's like Sabrina said, it's free. You already have Netflix. Maybe you finished Umbrella Academy, and this looks interesting. So you're going to catch people a little unawares. Having said that, I think Kaufman's new direction is really exciting, and there's so few filmmakers that not only want to do something like this, but have the wherewithal to get something like this made in the first place with, star. Like he can not only get this movie made, but make it look good and put Toni Collette in it. And like, how many other filmmakers can do that? There's only a handful of people. So Toni Collette is
like the CIA opera. She's like the Ethan Hunt. Like she keeps trying to get out of doing horror movies. Like she keeps saying like, this is my last horror movie. And they keep roping her back in for like one more. Like after Hereditary, she was like, even before Hereditary, I think she was like, I'm done with horror movies. And they're like, yeah, but Hereditary though. And then they just keep offering her.
Hey.
Oh, that's awesome. Wait, what is that? Is that like is that the screenplay?
The screenplay, yeah. That has some of the.
So jealous.
My patrons got it for me as a birthday gift last night. Like they all banded together, and I seriously could cry. It's so beautiful. I've already gone through it today.
That's beautiful. Yeah. You have really great. Shout out to amazing patrons. That's an amazing gift. I got Heather and Steve gave me a really cool VideoDrew of Grant that came in the mail yesterday. That's awesome. They'll show off at some point. But what about you, Eric? I want to get to you. You come from this from a little bit different perspective because you showed me things in this movie that I never would have watched, like realized on 100 rewatches I wouldn't have got. So tell us a little bit about your.
Yeah, well, my expectations, at least coming into the film, before we dissecting it, was more so that I like Kaufman's films. I'm not like a huge like Kaufman like fanatic. It's not something that I actively look forward to or seek out. Like when I am missing his movies, he's kind of like a director that I love, but like I forget that he's doing things until like it just shows up again. Like it's like a nice surprise when he comes around. And there are a handful of people like that, but whenever they do, it's always kind of like a nice kind of like gift that you get. And for this one, like Lon said, and like I think Aaron said, and everyone's kind of agreeing with, is that this is a little more abstract than some of his other films in the sense that it's like playing a lot with internal struggles that are kind of like the crux of the story, is very much about like what you are like believing is true of like the characters themselves inside their own like selves, as opposed to the other ones like Eternal Sunshine, get other things. There are a lot of like really creative assets to the movie that are external driving forces. Whereas for this one, I do think it's like a really bold choice for him to kind of like do what he wants for this particular platform. Again, it's on Netflix. It's going to like an audience that is more accessible to them, where they're not going to go seek it out actively. They're not going to get in their car to go drive to go see that theater specifically for it. They're going to be at home, like you guys said. They're going to watch it because it's like up and like, you know, next to it is Mulan and The Boys this weekend, and so it's like a really like kind of strange counter programming thing that they're doing right now, where it's grabbing an audience that definitely might resonate with them or might miss them entirely. But I do appreciate that he kind of came in with this thing. It seems that he came in with like a really kind of like a dedication to like the story, the source material that he really wanted to adapt in a way that's, you know, true to himself. Like Aaron, like you said, just you bring a lot of yourself into this story. I think he did that for himself. Like there was an interview that he did for I forgot what website it was on, where he was talking about it. And yeah, it's like I think there's a lot of truth behind, you know, how we see the art, you know, behind the camera. I think this speaks a lot to where Kaufman might be at a point in his life, you know, kind of like maybe the way he's kind of creating his art. And so I do think that there's something like truly like, you know, kind of like really beautiful about the way he crafted this story. And that's what I told Drew last night. If anything, this movie itself, beyond like where you appreciate the core story of it, is just a really well crafted film.
And we'll get into a little bit of that. That's very, very, very creative assets. Would you expect anything else from us? I mean, there are things in this movie that I swear to God, like, and I was watching this movie with a pretty fine eye to detail. Me and Lon, we watched it last night. I thought like I was picking up on a lot. And having read the source material, and we'll get into this in a second, I thought I was picking up a lot. Like when I was rewatching with Eric, and who was watching on his second watch, like there was just like my mind exploded over the nuance and detail and just sort of stuff that was put in it. But real quick, just to kind of break the story down a little bit as best as you can, sort of give a brief synopsis. Yeah, someone else want to give it a try? I mean, like,
can you do your cinema bias 1 minute? Like,
yeah, so I guess 60 seconds, and it would be a very brief synopsis. So it's ostensibly about a young woman who's going to meet her boyfriend's parents for the first time on a farm, and he's a little bit off, and she's thinking about ending things. She's thinking about breaking up the relationship or leaving. In some sense, they go to the farm. They meet his parents that seem kind of ditzy, a little bit out to lunch. It's David Thewlis and Toni Collette play his parents. They have this very weird, like surreal, almost horror movie like dinner that then turns into dessert and sort of chatting. All the time she's getting phone calls. She's missing phone calls from a certain individual who, when she picks up the phone, it is a creepy old man who we've been seeing, and we sort of put together is this janitor whose story we've been sort of getting interstitially woven in, and we're not quite sure how he's related to the central theme of the story. They leave the parents' house. They say goodbye after the parents seem to age and de-age throughout the course of the night. They stop at a Dairy Queen sort of place on the side of the road, where they call it a burr, I think they say.
To get a burr.
Get a burr.
Tulsi Town.
Tulsi Town, that's right. They go to a Tulsi Town, and if you grew up in any sort of sticks like I did, even though mine isn't in the Midwest, I was like, yeah, that looks like exactly the roadside place we stop and get our Newark, Delaware, ice soft serve.
Yeah.
We see they have a little weird interaction with the people working there, and then they stop by the school where we've seen the janitor work throughout the film, and that's where we really start to get the de-evolution or the sort of disembodied.
That's like when the penny drops.
Yeah, that's when the penny drops.
Entirely.
I feel like that's hard. What's going to be hard for people is the penny has dropped throughout the film. This is not one reveal.
Yeah, and I think that's what I really appreciate about it, is that this isn't meant to be a film with like a twist in it.
Yeah, there's no twist.
It's not supposed to reveal that this is what it is truly. It's kind of like very steadily like introduced to us through like different elements, like pretty much from the beginning of the film.
So I guess I would put a question out to you. At what point did you realize, and here's the spoiler, so just giving like 5 seconds for everyone to leave right now, for plug the phone. I don't know why you'd be on this watching this if you haven't seen it. That the old man, that none of this has ever taken place in the way that it's been perceived, that this is actually all just the memories of the and different iterations of the old janitor who is seeing his parents, who's remembering all these things, and is in fact the woman herself. That's another cognitive side of himself who is thinking about suicide and thinking about leaving the world, and Jesse Plemons represents, as far as I could read, the part of him that wants to stay in reality and wants to keep living, and keep sort of continuing on without questioning, why he's doing what he's doing, and his sadness and his own beliefs, sort of blindly keeping forward.
Yeah, I think the bottom line I would think is that I think kind of between you, me, and Lon, because Lon, you were here talking about it with us as well, is that we all kind of agree that the core element is that the film takes place within the mind of Jesse Plemons' character as the older janitor.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to see. I think we're asking to see if what Sabrina and Aaron, what you guys kind of take away from this. Like, are you on the same page as far as like the kind of people?
Oh, right. We should ask. Maybe you guys had totally different reads about what this movie was about.
How did you read the film? Like, what was actually going on in it?
Yeah. So my initial viewing, I think he does a really great job of kind of like manipulating us to think that this is through her perspective. This is her story at the end of the day. But then as we're getting those glimpses, we can see the swing set at the janitor's house. He's looking at it. And then we see the swing set on the road. It's just glimpses like that kind of remind us, like right from the beginning, it's like, oh, wait, we have to be paying attention to these little details because this is a Kaufman film. So right away, I'm kind of making mental notes. Obviously, I'm sitting down and enjoying the film, but I'm still like, I want to piece this together as soon as possible. So that all kind of like stood out to me. And then I did figure that it was Jake. And then as we started getting those glimpses during the dinner scene, especially the photograph, he sees herself, he sees himself, and just everything, the janitor's clothes in the washer, all of that, it made sense to me from the beginning. We were getting those little clues, but I feel like at the end of the dinner, that's when it really clicks. And then when I was paying attention because there aren't too many characters in this film, so I was paying attention to every single person's face, and you can see like the two girls who are laughing at the janitor are the two girls shy to talk to at the like Dairy Queen type of ice cream place. And so that all was standing out to me a lot. And so I realized that, probably right after the dinner scene that something was up like this, but I didn't necessarily think that she was kind of, that they were all one person and this was all in Jake's mind. And it's really interesting because she's credited as the young woman, and I saw that before I had actually started the movie. And I'm like, it's really interesting that like Jake is named, and then she starts off with Lucy and Louisa, and then he says Amy at one point, and that's one of the things, Ames, and then that's one of the things that I think where like I can't fully decide whether I think she's like an amalgamation of past relationships completely, or if she's like a fully fictionalized like a bunch of ideas that he kind of had growing up, because I think this one's really interesting since when we see Eternal Sunshine, we get a glimpse into like grieving over what once was, and then this is him grieving over stuff that never even happened. It's kind of reflecting on what could have been. So I think that's really interesting, but I started getting a sense of that probably 40 minutes in.
Yeah, and I would love to dive into this a little bit more because I also had like and I kept going back and forth. Was she ever realized she an amalgamation? I think because of Anomalisa, like now I'm thinking about it, like she must be there because the thing that he's remembering about his parents couldn't have just been made up. I mean, we can get into it, but like I don't think it's made up solely from cloth. I think he must have brought a woman or two home. Lon, I know you had some thoughts about.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we hear the story about trivia night told from several perspectives. But when they're first prompted to tell the story of how they met, that's the story, is that they connected eyes over trivia night, and then she talked to him, and he was a dork, but he asked her for a number eventually anyway, and then they went out. And then we hear that story again, but he never gets the guts up to actually talk to her, and she's just a woman that he saw across the bar. I'm inclined to say because of the repetition there that that's probably true. Like, I feel like the Jessie Buckley, the image of this woman, is probably a woman he saw one night that made a big impression on him that he did not ever get up the courage to talk to. And Hayes now filling in the blanks. Like, she has different jobs because he imagines her with all kinds of jobs, some of which he wanted or he had, some of which he dreamed of having or thought she might have because she seemed interesting and exciting to him in some way. So I think that's why there's a lot of uncertainty, because he never probably talked to this person. She's a mystery. I also think, I know that we were kind of not necessarily aligned on this last night, but I still think that at this point, a lot of the themes of the movie are kind of about that idea that she is this idealized woman, as he refers to her at one point. She is kind of representative of womanhood and his perfect woman, because they never got to know one another. And as soon as you start to get to know somebody, they become flesh and blood and three-dimensional, and the idealized version kind of dies. And then it's like in the Charlie Kaufman world, it's like a slow, well, now that we know each other and you're real, I'm just going to eventually get tired of you.
Great Eternal Sunshine. Yeah.
We're going to turn on each other, and like, it's all downhill from there. Like, and so I think that's kind of a lot of the sadness of the movie is, especially now that he's looking at it from the perspective of an old man. Like, when you're young, it's still exciting. You've got all of these romances ahead of you, even if they don't last or eventually they crumble. Well, they're new experiences. When you're old and it's over, you're just looking back on like this graveyard of relationships gone or missed opportunities. And I think that's a lot of the sadness of the film, is that reflection that she's this perfect woman because she's not really real. She's just an image in his.
I know we disagreed on this. I really truly think the movie is less about the relationship and more about the idea of losing one's mind and memory. And the sadness really comes from the idea that he was a brilliant man who was able, if not brilliant in the conventional sense, they talk about his pen, the most diligent and stuff. I really think that he was a misunderstood man, at least by his parents. And he was a brilliant mind that was able to have all these things, to memorize Pauline Kael reviews of a woman under the influence of what, and that he feels his mind slipping. And she represents that part of his brain that is still cognizant and aware that his mental faculties are starting to slip and doesn't want to end up like his parents did. Aaron?
I would just add before we go on, I don't think these two things are mutually exclusive.
No, they're not mutually exclusive.
Like,
but we're just arguing about
overlapping things. And because I agree with like what you were saying about how they come to be fighting these kind of dual battles, that Jesse Plemons is still kind of connected to the world and his memories, and Jesse Buckley is like, I'm ready, let's go home, forget the chains, and we need to get out of here. I agree with you there. I just think that to me, the movie was speaking more towards this idea of melancholy over lost love than it was necessarily just about terror over lost memory and losing your mind. But I think they're both there.
Yeah. What was your read? You guys will be the.
I mean, I don't know. There's still so much meat on this bone to pick. That's the thing about this movie. And I kind of was about to say I'm a little bit between Drew and Lon here, because I think they aren't mutually exclusive at all. So I do think that this man could be very brilliant, could have all these interests. You see the books like in his room, like the physics books and the different books of poetry, the Woodward poetry, the Bone Dog poem, and everything else. Like, so, I mean, there are tons of super brilliant people who just never realize their potential. And I'm not to talk down about a janitor, but this janitor maybe thinks I could have been something. I could have been a gerontologist. I could have been a writer. I could have been all these things that the younger woman was in this movie throughout, when she became Lucy or Lorena or all these different. Also, I think Charlie Kaufman, I know that this wasn't originally the two who were casted, but Charlie Kaufman casting two Jessies, I think is very, very meta, because this is what he's remembering throughout this is just a fragment of himself expanded onto this woman. And I think there's no doubt about it. He obsessed about a woman he fell in love with at a bar, never talked to her. And then when you really realize it, and I mean, I really, really reacted strongly to this, because I think, at another point in my life, I was that person who never got the guts to go and speak to.
We all have been, right.
And like, then I would wonder why it would never happen. Now I look at, these are all reasons why I couldn't have a conversation with but I understand. And when the janitor's speaking with her at the end of the movie, and she's like at first, like, kind of nice. And then she's like, you know what? He was a creep. Like, why would I remember? He was a mosquito from 40 years ago. That's what you're at. And like, just imagining this person who, I mean, like, there are tons of people out there who just idealize a person they don't really know, or they watch maybe on a on an internet show or something and think that they maybe know. Hypothetically, I'm thinking outside the box here. Not applying to anybody. Couldn't apply to anybody here. But if that happened, they may start to really think, I'm in love with this person. And they think, oh my God, if I brought him home to... And then even when these people, myself included at a point in my life, would start to think about these fake relationships, I would think about them going wrong because that's realistic and it would make it more real in my mind and make it more real. And then to have all these fake relationships I pretend to have lost because I didn't have the real ones. So I had to replace them with the, and so I just think about this with a 70-year-old janitor doing the same thing, coming to these realizations and in his own mind and as real as it. And so, yeah, I think that essentially is what the movie was. I mean, and I got that pretty early on, and just definitely I've watched it 4 times now.
Oh, okay, so you win.
Yeah. I mean, I just had my 4th watch this afternoon, and I'm still getting choked up thinking and talking about it. It just it clearly comes, like all of Kaufman's work, from an incredibly organic place. And I really mean that it gets overused and I think, but I mean, he's a very natural writer with his emotions. And that's why maybe people who don't quite have the same emotional makeup maybe don't quite get it. And often it gets maybe laughed at with his stuff, or you see things like, has Charlie Kaufman ever had sex? Things like that out there. And it's just like, oh man, that's just somebody who
I love Charlie Kaufman more than anything. And I will tell you, I'm trying to get through his book. He just wrote a novel. I'm trying to get through it. And it seems so masturbatory and so self-indulgent that it's been really hard for me to get past the first 20 pages. And I'm trying, there's no one who loves Charlie Kaufman more than me. And I'm after this came out, I'm like, God damn, I'm gonna have to try it again. Cause it's a huge epic sized novel. And I'm like, I'm going to have to try it again. It just seems like such a laborious undertaking that I get it when people are like, he seems masturbatory. He seems self-indulgent. You think of adaptation in the voiceover, this in the voiceover, Eternal Sunshine, and the idea of, projecting something onto somebody else. I mean, I almost picked up that this woman, I think on the 3rd replay, I was like, wait, is he not even heterosexual? Because there's a couple hints in there that he might have never brought a woman home. And that he, his dad saying Nancy, and the way that she says sissy at one point, or reverse, you know, and the idea that he might have been so strange. Yeah, Sabrina?
Well, that's the thing. I 100% agree with you, because his parents, their relationship through all these interactions, because as we're watching it through Jessie Buckley's character as the young woman's lens, it's so different than realizing that it's actually through Jake's, and you pick up on so much more. It's one of those things where it takes them so long to come down, and that's a choice that it shows they don't really care about him. And then once they do come down the stairs and they go to meet them, they pay way more attention to the young woman than they do to him at all. They're not even making eye contact with him a lot of the times through their interactions. And they are the dad's criticizing art to the young woman, probably the same way he did to Jake's character when he was a child and he was into painting. And it's one of those things, because they talk about abstract art, obviously, in a whole scene in this film. And this entire film has that whole dreamlike surrealism, and that just doesn't resonate with every single person. And I completely understand that, and I get it. And it is it can borderline be self-indulgent sometimes, where it's I'm just so intelligent, I'm making this film, and if you don't get it, then you're just not smart. Go watch your Marvel movies or something like that. But
it's accessible.
But I think the difference. Yeah, and
I think it's an interesting. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, it's okay. That's kind of the thing that at the end of the day, I really do think that this is just his entire grieving of his life. And it's solely focused. It's focused a lot on the relationship, but I don't think he's just grieving love. It's grieving every single thing, because when he's talking about poetry and he's talking about all of this, and then we have that scene at the end referencing A Beautiful Mind, it's just kind of I could have been somebody, but clearly his parents weren't really there for him. They probably just didn't pay too much attention to him. Nobody had. They even make comments saying he didn't really have any friends. He was kind of an outsider. And it's reflecting on all of that and thinking in your life, if I made different decisions, if I just kept going with my certain dreams as a painter or as anything else, he would be in a completely different situation. So yes, a relationship as well, but at the end of the day, it's all the little things that they talk about in this film, even just the fact of like making more friends.
You know, he go ahead there, Delon.
I was just gonna say I don't know. I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but I think that we do have to remember that it's about memory and it's about consciousness and it's about the way that we remember. So I'm hesitant to go too far and be like his parents were dismissive or his parents ignored him as factual, because a lot of the time when you're looking back on things and the movie's clearly about regret on some level, and an old person looking back on their life and feeling that regret for paths not taken or things not done. And I think that when you're looking back regretfully on your youth and on your artistic pursuits, it is very tempting to point the finger and say, well, they didn't encourage me, or they were always down on me. And I don't know that we can always, I think that there are moments of levity, of positivity around the parents to be like, I don't think this was necessarily a horribly like abusive situation, or even that he didn't have opportunities. I mean, you could get to the end of your life, not feel like you realized your potential, and it wasn't because something specific went wrong. In fact, maybe that's even the greater tragedy. If you have something you can point to and be like, well, I got into that accident, or I had that, I had to take care of my mom, or I had to do this thing, or I got fired, there's always something you could point to as an excuse. But if you don't have anything, it might be tempting to be like, well, mom never believed in me.
Well, he has this conversation. Right. Yeah, he has this argument. Well, you can actually, if you go through, you can watch him say, "Do you like my parents? And she says, "Your parents clearly love you." It's this constant affirmation that he needs to hear, that his parents did love him, even if they didn't understand him. Even if I took it more as like he thought of his parents as simple people that were probably trying to understand him a lot of the time, but everything was kind of going over their head. And even in a small way, he resented them because he had to take care of the parents, and their decaying mental faculties like caused him a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of resentment. At the end, when they're in the car and right before they turn off to go to the school, he's talking about being coddled by, like, what does it mean to be? Is it people that are coddled by their parents turn out to be homosexuals or deviants in some ways? And she's like, well, he said not that homosexuality is a deviance, and they have this whole kind of looping conversation about what that means, because that's this sort of thing. And so you get the idea that they were both smothering because he's the only son. Yeah. That was a big break from the book too.
And then they have the conversation about like the Freudian like bullshit that she says, and like he says it'd be nice to have something to pin it on. Like, it sounds tempting. It sounds tempting to have something to pin like all your losses on. And he's like kind of like going over that in his head, just thinking like like you said, it'd be nice to have like some sort of defining factor to say like, this is why like I didn't do this thing in my life.
Yeah. I think. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh no! I was just gonna say, I think that sort of to what Drew was saying, like I think that's really key. That when he's remembering his parents and thinking of them as like, oh, they were so embarrassing because they weren't on my level. We see Toni Collette and David Thewlis acting very bumbling and very like yokels. And then when he's thinking about how they were smothering, we're seeing Toni Collette act very smothering and overwhelming and like, go down to the basement. Here's what to do. And like, so we're always seeing just like facets of who these people were.
Sort of like a dog.
Much like Jimmy. So yeah, I feel like that we all like every interaction, every observation in the movie that has to be in your mind is like, well, what the thinker is determining what we're seeing, not the essence of this person in objective reality.
NerdChronic, you actually have some.
Oh, well, I 100% agree. It was like, that's kind of how he just like perceives them. Because even when we're having the scenes with like the girls at the Dairy Queen type of place, and at school, it's like, are we even real? Like, are they that dramatic, like making fun of him and things like that? Or is that just how he feels himself? Right. It's one of those things we're looking through his perspective. So that's where it gets really interesting. And yeah, so I think that's just the way he feels, but that might have necessarily not been the case, obviously, from all the reasons you guys said.
No, NerdChronic, this is one of the first iterations of like the things that like I hadn't noticed until did I say NerdChronic? I hope that's okay. Eric pointed out to me was the dog, and not only the dog, but also how Jesse Plemons can sort of shift the emotional resonance of scenes.
Well, so to go back a little bit, like to talk about the progression of like, when you start to realize like what's going on in the film. I think the first thing, it kind of started to me like right away as soon as she's giving the opening monologue, because the two opening shots of her standing on the street to get in the car, right away is like it's like the old man watching her from the window, The first shot is the old man in his janitor attire, and then it cuts away to her again. Then it cuts back to him in the same shot, but it's the back of Jesse Plemons' head with like shorter, lighter hair and with his plaid shirt on, as opposed to like the janitorial uniform. So that immediately was like, to me, is like, okay, obviously we're condensing like ideas here of like what's happening between like certain characters. So that's like the first thing that tips you off to like, you know, kind of like the structure that's supposed to happen.
And you're hearing her monologue through this old man's voice. So it's sort of like this they do a lot of interesting sound things. So you're hearing this overlapping monologue. So that's like the first tip off, is that they share one brain. Yeah.
There's like, and a lot of like sound design is like a big important thing about the way like we are able to perceive like certain internal monologues from her, as opposed to like spoken dialogue that is woven throughout the edit, like between characters and like overlapping shots. So things like that, like I think what Drew was saying is like, for me in particular, because I look at this stuff like very closely, obviously all the time, inherently, is with the editing. And to me, when I say like the film is like such a masterfully crafted film, that comes down like heavily on the editing. Like the editing to me is like such an incredible feat of purposeful like deceit and mistaken identity in a way where it's on paper, like on like, you know, from a technical standpoint, it's like edited like very like poorly. Like it's poorly edited.
It's crazy.
But that's by design. It's by design because the bad edits are supposed to, I think, inflict like kind of this sense of like kind of like this weird sense of timing and rhythm and spatial relations between the characters.
Between shots, characters are standing far away from each other. In the next shot, they will be coming from a totally different direction. They will be walking up to you from a totally different direction than we previously saw you from 6 feet away. Suddenly they're 1 feet away, and then the previous shot will go back to it being. It's really crazy.
And it's consistent. It's consistent throughout the entire film from beginning to end.
Inconsistent.
And so that to me is like the most impressive thing. It's not like kind of these like sticky one beat things where like every 15-20 minutes we'll see like a crazy edit where like something happens like, oh, that's weird.
It's no jump scare.
No, but like it's very like consistently like woven throughout the entire film where things don't click the right way, because that's what memories are. That's what memories and kind of like the internal psyche is. Like you remember things not in like a linear, like perfect fashion. Like you condense things, like you're suddenly from like this point to this room to this thing, wearing this clothes, wearing these glasses, and so on. And like these, the editing in particular for me was kind of the thing that I enjoyed watching and studying and dissecting the most out of like most of the other elements.
Now, do you think like there's something, you know, because what you put out with emotions is sort of the interesting, which is that we see the whole movie from her perspective, which is sort of like the being able to see your life through the perspective of somebody who is thinking about breaking up with you, you know, so this very critical perspective. But it's actually Jesse Plemons, the avatar of Jesse Plemons as a young man who is in control of the emotional beats of the memory. So when he wants them to get off too dark of a topic, he'll mention, oh, the dog. And then suddenly you'll see the dog, but all he can remember about the dog is that it is that it was shaking wet one time, and he can remember the picture of it. So the second time he mentions the dog to bring up the memory, he can't even get the physical dog. He can't even see it. So you just hear her go, oh, the dog.
Yeah, he has like, there are moments in the film where like he is able to kind of shift the kind of tone of the scene.
She'll act different. She'll suddenly happy. The family will be happy.
First time is when she asks about what's in the basement, and he says like, I had a dog once, and she's like, oh, I love dogs, and like they get away from the basement. The second time when they start talking about like his parents, she says, we've all had problems with our parents, and then like she's like, oh, where's Jimmy? And like gets up and she starts playing the dog. At that point, the second time, we don't even see the dog like at all. Like we hear her jingling with its chain, and then like it cuts away and the dog's like not in the shot at all.
And then when you cut back, and it's like the dog was never in there. Like it wasn't even in. There was no dog.
Yeah. And then at dinner when the biggest, I think, like really like telltale sign of like kind of what's going on with like the whole thing with the psyche is when she's telling the story of how they met. Which to me, like I think I do agree with you guys in some sense that I think the story that she's telling of the bar trivia night, I think that's like a real story of like an event that happened. And I do think that's a memory that he has that he wished it went that way.
Of course.
That was a good girl that he saw that he wished that she talked to him and so on and so on. But yeah, she said that's why she tells the story, and like David Thewlis catches her in like a contradictory statement, which is like, I thought you guys were talking about
Brezhnev, and she says, well, he hadn't talked to me all night, and he goes, I thought you just said you talked about Brezhnev.
So she catches herself in a way where like she's not like hiding anything. She just realizes that she just said the wrong thing, and she doesn't know why. And so there's like after that, there's dead air for about like 5-10 seconds, and then it shifts back to her, and she's suddenly like boom, like she's happy again. She's telling the story in like a much more jovial manner, and she's like telling it again now finally how he would prefer to have it. which is like the following story of like how she went up to one and they start the conversation and it all worked out.
And everyone's still like, because it's they're talking about. Well, I want to get other people's perspective. What do you think of that dinner scene?
Yeah.
What were you able to like? What were some of the things that you guys picked up on mainly? Because I could read that scene a million different ways of what.
That's fine.
Sorry. Of Toni Collette's expressions, these sort of this hyper manic thing, this sort of like, are they crazy? Because you can read this originally, and when I read the book, people are saying, oh, it's not really a horror movie. There are a lot of movies right now that are being marketed as horror movies, like First Reformed to First Revenant. There's a lot of movies that like First Reformed that are not really horror movies. This movie, I feel like, does fit a psychological horror because it does deal with existential horror. But I can see how, like, in the book especially, you're made to feel like there's a threat and there's a killer on the loose possibly, and there's an idea of a brother that is a janitor who might have had mental problems and might be stalking them. So and so the realization, the shoe dropping that there was no, that the brother might exist or might not exist, but it's really just one person's memory. Thanks for the new member. Awesome. Thanks, guys. So I think there's a lot to unpack there, but I think especially when they're talking about being able to see yourself in pictures. Not being able to see yourself in pictures, the idea of Toni Collette knowing, and the realization that these characters kind of know that they are environment, that they are nothing more than like fodder, but that knowledge is something. I mean, what did you guys think about some of those more word-filled scenes?
Yeah.
Or something, yeah. Sabrina, you have anything?
Oh, sure. Yeah, at the end of the day, like those are the scenes that I love the most because it's playing with you, with the audience members mentally. Like that's why I consider this a horror, because it's so psychological, it's so deep, it's so dreary, and I felt weird after this. And like I like being affected by films. I was super affected by Hereditary. Like I couldn't stop thinking about it for days. Same thing with this one, that it made me like look into my own life and like my biggest fear in the entire world is being like at the end of my life and having all those kind of regrets. So then all played out for this guy's life was something really interesting. But those scenes I loved because, first of all, I don't know if we've like really praised it yet, but the performances are on point from every single actor. Like on absolutely incredible, doing everything that they need to do. This ensemble was amazing. And I loved how ridiculous and silly and eccentric some of the acting was, because it was kind of like unnerving to be able to watch like David Thewlis, like the way he was moving around, and Toni Collette, how like manic she was. I never want to sit at a dinner table with Toni Collette. That's what I'll say after Hereditary and this film. But yeah,
I feel like Toni Collette. I'm always the Toni Collette at the dinner table, being like, okay, let's get this going.
Okay. Yeah, but it's things where I think it just deepens like the anxiety and the insecurity that Jake has. I think at the end of the day, that's the biggest thing. It's just like, this is just showing all of his insecurities in the dialogue with the young woman, in the dialogue with the parents. It's his own insecurity that honestly, he's sitting there and like shifting blame to some people, but at the end of the day, it's his own insecurities that stopped him from doing anything. And it's apparent in scenes like the dinner scene with all the dialogue heavy back and forth confusion. I love how like frantic it is. That's really what it is just that insecurity and anxiety at the end of the day.
I mean, I think that there's something to that. And maybe, I do put such a heavy emphasis on the idea of losing one's mind, and the idea that that's the I'm thinking of leaving things as trying to leave the world with your faculties in check. But I think there is also the real tragedy is that he might be not overreacting, but his fear and anxiety, which his parents have talked about as being a crippling thing with him, might be causing him to think that he's worse off than he actually is, because he's clearly still a pretty brilliant mind with amazing ability to recall. I mean, you can't have that level of recall where you memorize Pauline Kael's entire review of Woman Under the Influence, that you can recall all these physics terms, and you can. I mean, yes, there's a part of your brain that works on rote memorization, and like he seems to be able to do that, and that sort of is the diligent part of it. But that. It's this anxiety of having not lived a life, but it felt like in that life, he was so anxious about what might be wrong, about what people might be thinking about him, the way the girls are laughing at him, the way that his parents must think of him, the way this woman would have thought of him. When in actuality, the only thing holding him back was his own anxiety about perception.
And yeah, that insecurity 100% plays out in all of those scenes, and we see that because it's dramatic. I can assure you, like, if we were actually seeing this in real life, those two girls that were laughing at him at the school, they're probably not even really paying attention to him. They're probably not laughing at him. It's just him afraid of his own perception.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think
two things.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, one, I was thinking about this yesterday. We're assuming he's got all of these things memorized, like all these poems, but we are entirely in his head. Maybe he just maybe his fantasy is that he can recite this whole poem, and it's like two layers of how do we know he's actually got it memorized versus he's just imagining a world where he has the whole thing memorized?
Well, I guess because why would he be so upset? We see specific items like the pollen kale, the pictures.
Right.
Why would
They're
he
all
be
things he knows? Because I'm not sure that the movie is like literally this is the memory he's having, or he's fantasizing about having these conversations with people.
I think I know
these pieces of art well enough to be like, oh, and then she would recite Bone Dog to me.
I think that
doesn't actually have Bone Dog memorized.
I think there's actually something to refute that, which is that when he's remembering when the Pauline Kael stuff and she's reading the review, she says a couple words that he doesn't understand. And he goes, I guess I don't understand what you mean by this or whatever. So it is like he's memorized and he's contained something, and but he doesn't understand what certain words mean in that context.
We actually discussed that specific moment last night when he's like, I'm not sure what you mean by transient. That's also just the kind of thing that you say when you're having that kind of conversation with another person. Like he's having this discussion with a girlfriend in the fantasy. He doesn't want to be like, that's wrong. So you'd be like, well, I'm not sure what you mean by transient,
But it's also how you relate. It's also how you relate to criticism that you both respect, but he clearly disagreed with the perception of Pauline Kael's review of Women Under the Influence. He felt like...
I can remember I disagreed with this review without knowing everything the review said. That's all I'm saying.
That's fair. I mean, look, there's so much repetition in this. The way he memorizes the jingle for the thing, the way that he's reciting the thing from A Beautiful Mind. There's so much that he absorbs, and we do find out he's done.
I think, I think you're both kind of correct in some ways where it's like, he clearly takes a lot of pride in like these things. Kind of defining himself, like he likes having the arts and the sciences kind of define like how he presents himself. But I do think there are like elements where like he is more cool with certain things. He's more comfortable with like say the art or the painting or the pictures. Whereas when it comes to like say the film review, I think that's a part of him where he like also loves that. He wants to be a part of that, have them be a part of himself, but he can't grasp that as comfortably as he does the other things. And so he's kind of saying,
stuttering.
He's like saying like his assertions. I thought it was assertions, and there's like elements where he can't quite get that one down as well as the other ones. And so like I do think it's like so like he loves to have these things as a part of him to like absorb them and to kind of be a part of his own persona, but he doesn't have it like exactly locked down as comfortably as he wants to at all times.
It just I feel like
memorizing as opposed to conceiving or conceptualizing, that's an example of diligence. Like you can memorize something without necessarily grokking it all. So I think that could be part of it.
But it also is kind of brilliance. Like it does kind of like, people with photographic memory, people that are savants in certain ways that like they have the ability to mimic, to recall without having to they could recall whole languages if they've heard it, but they don't necessarily know or understand the meaning.
Right.
He clearly wants to understand. Go ahead.
Oh, no. I was just finished. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to jump.
No, I mean, he clearly wants to understand. And there's certain concepts too. Like, I think that's interesting. He's clearly more comfortable talking about the emotional resonance of A Woman Under the Influence had on him. The idea that Cassavetes showed a kindness to Genia Rowland's character, that there was the empathy, and that he wants to imagine this woman that he was dating, no matter who she is, whatever side of him represents, as empathetic towards old people, as empathetic towards these people that are forgotten by society or have lost their faculties. But there is a part of him that is her that it really resents and wants to get out of, and has no respect and has this sort of like loathing of the elderly, of situations in which people are acting strange or crazy. And he kind of, it's the more beautiful side of Plemons, and maybe this character is the Plemons side that's just like, I just want to feel sympathy. I want to give myself a break. I want to see myself with love and understanding. I don't know.
No, I think I totally agree with all that. The other thing I was going to say is just because we were talking about the dinner scene specifically, I was thinking a lot yesterday about like if you were romanticizing a relationship that never happened or that fizzled out. It's interesting to me that he goes back to the like bringing her to meet his parents, which is not always like sometimes can be fun, but it's not always like your top memory of a relationship gone by. That's not the highlight. But it's like a milestone. And I feel like there's we're going to a lot of sites or we're re-experiencing a lot of things that may have been sort of like life milestones. We may not even know it. Like that ice cream shop may have been the site of an important experience in his life.
I think it was, yeah. I think it was from there.
Where either a moment of rejection, and that's why he associates it with being like he has to turn around, or a moment of connection, like when he makes he's talking to the girl with the sort of rash who he sees in the hallway. Mm-hmm. So I mean, that kind of made me think that there is a whole other level to the movie of like the locations important, the individual scenarios are important, because also like it ends at he's receiving an award, which would be another life milestone. So I do think there's something drawing him to these moments in time and these places, even if we don't have enough information. Like the basement is another one. Like I don't think we have enough information to necessarily know what happened in that basement, why he hates the basement so much, why there are scratches on the door. I think that might just be like we'll never find out, but something that he associates with trauma.
It also speaks to a dread, a fear, anxiety. That's when he calls her on the phone call he keeps getting, just like himself saying, I'm scared, this is scary. I want to go talk about for a second. There's well, it just slipped my mind for what I was going to say. The dance at the end. There's all this. It kind of falls apart at the end, or I could see how people start getting confused, because even if you understand that she's a construct, there's still so much to unpack. What are they talking about when the girl keeps mentioning the smell of varnish, and then she goes, "That's not varnish." I have a theory that like he put himself in the car and was monoxide poisoning, and he was trying to kill himself. And there's something to that theory about at the end when he's choking, you see him as the janitor, he's choking. This is not just a dream. This is not just a memory. This is somebody who is like dying of carbon monoxide inhalation.
Yeah, I definitely read it as the smell part is when the engine fumes start coming into the car. We were talking about this yesterday too. I think I've kind of shifted when we were watching it yesterday, I still kind of thought we were seeing him throughout that entire day. I think the whole movie might be him in the car killing himself. Yeah. And those moments we see of him as the janitor at work, those are also memories. They're just memories of the day he just had. Because again, it's all his consciousness. So he's remembering, or he's thinking about his parents. He's thinking about this girl. Then he remembers like, I watched that movie during my lunch break today. Robert Zemeckis, pretty good director.
The one movie goes right into like when they flash back from that movie. Robert Zemeckis. This is a great scene too. It really does play with the perspective. You get that you suddenly are inside the movie, directed by Robert Zemeckis, and then immediately she starts acting like a waitress when she's at the dinner. She immediately starts picking up the thing.
I think because there is a shot at the house. This is a last thing, and then I'll let other people talk. I promise. But there is a shot at the house where she looks outside and sees the car already with the snow collecting on it, like his car outside the school. And that to me, that's the giveaway that he's been in that car this whole time, and all of the janitor memories are also memories.
And when he takes off his clothes, I mean, I will ask this to Aaron because we talked a little bit about the ending and what happens when you watch post scene. The last thing that you hear is the sound of a car engine starting up, turning over. Yeah. So does that maybe imply that he chose to live? I mean, we do see him get out of the car. He's choking. He's seeing that he's naked. He takes off all his clothes, but we do see him get out of the car and have this conversation with this pig, which is the pig from the parents' farm that it was the Silence of the Lambs. He saw this pig rot out from the inside, be eaten up from the inside with maggots. He takes off his clothes and he has this very, existential conversation with this pig who's saying, it's not that bad. Someone's got to be the pig infested with maggots. And like, it's sort of like a conversation that maybe implies that it is his way of dying. But I don't know. There's something about that sound, about the very last sound of that movie. You go through the whole credit sequence and then it's the sound of a car engine turning over. So like, what is that? I don't know. Yeah.
So
I think, what did you say? Sorry.
So elaborate for us there.
Yeah, I thought, I think that is kind of where a little bit of the hope is in Kaufman's version of the story. I think that the answer is yes. either way. I like, and I think that often is like a answer that really doesn't work because the writing and the story and what the themes are presented don't work that way. But in this scenario, with how Kaufman's choosing to take this story, after learning about the source material, I definitely think that he most likely killed himself. And that just the whole him walking through with the pig, I think, was kind of those final moments of whatever form of consciousness he was in from the suicide, kind of being at peace, forgiving himself for his choice. Not saying it like makes it like a pro-suicide movie or something, but it's just like more his psychology is finally at peace, at least. And this is like last moment of a little bit of a semblance of a victory, I guess, for this character who has been relishing waiting for an actual victory in reality this whole time, I guess, if that makes sense, rather than a victory in his head. So
I really wonder if this movie should saying thanks for the donation.
Somebody in the comments actually stole everything I was going to say, so that's amazing that we had the same thing. But it's like when you're dying of hypothermia, the interesting thing with like the carbon monoxide, like would it be warm in the car? Does he have heat? Is he also like dying of like hyperthermia and like trapping himself inside the car? Like there's so many different questions, and you could kind of decide that on yourself. But I think with the taking his clothes off, you do start to get really crazy and you start to get really frantic. So I do think these are his last moments of like consciousness, and I think he's obviously imagining the whole pig. And we look at like the pig with the maggots, and it's dying this like slow, painful death. It's getting eaten alive. And I think that's kind of how he viewed his entire life. So I feel like he's almost like feeling like he's like consoled by the pig, that they both had a similar situation until like truly like live, basically. And it's almost like they're together at these final stages, and that's what he's experiencing because he having those hallucinations, those feelings because of like hypothermia or being at the end of consciousness, either one.
What do you guys make of the dance scene? Go ahead.
Oh no, just real quick before the dance scene with the pig. The pig even like when I don't know if the old man says something or if the pig just kind of acknowledges. He's like, yeah, like sometimes like your hand in life is just not great. You still gotta kind of play it like the whole ending like just felt like an Adventure Time episode that I've seen about a million times over. Like it was, and I mean the highest compliment. Like Charlie Kaufman definitely watches Adventure Time and loves that show. I have no doubt about it.
Oh,
like,
I need to watch Adventure Time.
Wait, one more thing.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I would say one more thing on the pig being eaten by maggots. I felt like last night when I or this morning when I rewatched that part, I think that's a metaphor again for him being tormented his entire life by insecurity, neuroses, anxiety, and depression. His thoughts are the maggots inside of him that are eating him alive. He is the pig with the maggots.
Or what he perceives as his own mental illness passed down hereditarily through his mother, who we find out is a little bit. Yeah,
those are the maggots that live within him and are eating him alive from the inside, that sort of ruined his chances to live on and be normal in his mind.
Lon, how many movies have we watched where people have psychic worms of some sort? Like we've watched so many movies with psychic slugs. Weird.
Soul slugs are even more disturbing because they come out your mouth.
Well, I mean, what do you?
Dark Forces.
I mean, there is also that scene where he see at Dark Forces. You guys watch Dark Forces on Netflix. It's a Mexican movie. It is crazy bananas. It's really good.
Time Crimes is the last movie you recommended to me, so I'll trust you here too.
Yeah, well, Time Crimes. Time Crimes, another movie that plays around with it. I mean, what do you guys make of? I mean, I want to talk about a little bit about the dance and what the musical stuff means, but going back a little bit to that part about the pig, when we first get introduced to that story, she's trying to. He's seeing these dead these dead lamps, very Silence of the Lambs thing, and she goes, how did they die? He doesn't want to talk about it, he just want to think about it, but then he does want to get into this death process story, and I didn't really know what to make of that scene. It's like he's trying not to dwell, but he can't help it, or it's like, you know, this idea of death that she wants to focus on, but he doesn't, that Jesse Plemons iteration doesn't want to.
Yeah, the lambs and the pigs, stuff like that. Like I think you obviously the lambs in a way are reflect himself as, you know, he's like basically freezing to death at the end. And she asks,
interesting. Yeah.
She's like, what happened to him? And he's like, what does it matter? Like they're frozen. They're not going to go anywhere. And she's like, well, what happened to them now? He's like, they'll probably be burned. And it's like him like trying to basically say like he doesn't want to think about what's going to happen to him like once he's dead. He doesn't want to like comprehend like what's the aftermath of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and then the pigs is like, yeah, I think you guys kind of like I'm in the same boat.
And what's more disturbing to him is the idea that like not death, but what happens before death.
Yeah, like the process of like like being eaten alive and then like again the aftermath of that. He's stuck right in the middle of like he's trying to just grasp like what's happening at hand as opposed to like what's happening before, leading up to this, and what's happening after.
This is like such a fun birthday topic, by the way. We're talking about like brain worms and
this is perfect. She's having a great time talking.
Last night I watched Eternal Sunshine. Then this one. It's all good.
I do think also that scene at the farm, we're again playing with his conflicted feelings about his parents. Like he's remembering this and his dad being neglectful and causing these animals to die brutally and painfully. But then he's like, well, life is brutal on a farm. Like he's having this internal debate with himself about what kind of man his father was and the kinds of experiences he had on the farm as a kid. And like, I think we've all had that, like, you think about your trauma and then you want to blame your parents, but then you're like, but they were just trying to do their best. They weren't terrible people. And I think that's also, I think everything Eric said, I totally 100% agree with. I just think also there's another level of that scene, which is he does have complicated feelings about both of his parents that he's still working out.
And look, how could they take care of animals when they were losing their own? Like, is it neglect when it's like they couldn't remember? Like maybe like, that his dad needed to have like the words pinned to the
we don't even know. That could have happened when his dad was still like relatively young and vibrant, or it could have been after his mom was already dead and his father was doddering around somewhere. Like we really have
doddering around
idea.
That's what it says. It's so interesting because when you first see the dad, he appears with a cut, like a Band-Aid on his head, and like that is so ages keep changing. So, but something about that Band-Aid is supposed to be so important because it implies like literally a brain injury, like a cut to the head, like a mental thing that's gone wrong, that his dad, it also like it sort of like reminisces about, how do you get cuts like that on your head? You bump into things, you hit your, you're not really looking where you're going. You're not paying attention. So yes, I do believe there's an element of neglect, but I don't think it was malicious neglect or like a selfish neglect. I think it's the neglect that comes from losing one's faculties.
And also in that sense, I think it also kind of harkens back to what you were saying earlier, Lon, which is just like the idea that his parents weren't like malicious to him in any certain way. Like it wasn't an abusive relationship where like they shot down his aspirations. Or they just like couldn't really comprehend or like grasp on what he wanted to tell them. Like as she says, like I stopped understanding what Jake was saying when he was like 15 years old, or like 7 years old, and like so like there was a point where they couldn't like really accommodate his like needs to like grow like anymore.
So like what is it?
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. No, please.
I was just going to say, those kinds of slights as a young and impressionable person who's trying something artistic, your mother wouldn't need to be that withering or negative for it to feel like a huge rejection to you in that moment. So I think the movie's playing around with a lot of that, of like all of these things the parents say could be real things that they said, but we're seeing this shaded version that he's remembering years and years after the fact that are clouded by his own emotions and feelings,
and they're never cool.
No, they're not. And they say nice things. I mean, one of his final memories of his mother is telling him how smart he always was.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rosemary.
It's interesting whenever we look back, typically in films, and we're looking through things like through a nostalgic lens. It's always a lot warmer. But this one is definitely, I would say that he's looking at this in a lot of a colder way. And he's definitely exaggerating all of that. And it's really just this internal battle that he almost like made himself an outsider by not warming up to the people around him because he thinks everybody's being a lot crueler to him than they probably are. I don't think really got to warm up. He never went up to the girl at the bar. He never decided to have those conversations with his parents. He's thinking girls are laughing at him at the school, and they're probably not. And
his iteration of what she was thinking about him. He was a fly. He was a worm. He was disgusting. He was bothering me when he didn't talk.
He didn't even talk to her.
Like no, he didn't do
anything.
He's imagining women are thinking that about him, but he doesn't know.
His own mind work.
His own insecurities set that up for himself. All of us have gone into something once in our lives and been like, oh, I'm not good enough for this, or I'm going to be really bad at this. And that sets us up for failure. And we see this consistently throughout his entire life, that he's kind of like low-key always slightly setting himself up for failure a little bit here and there, whether it's meeting her and his parents. And that's why I know we're getting to the ballet scene, so I'll save.
No, we can take this wherever we want. Don't feel like we need to get to ballet. Yeah.
Yes. And I think that it shows that internal conflict that he has throughout his entire life, because I think that he recognizes that this isn't something that's sustainable and it's not something that's healthy or positive to his life. And that's what, for the dance scene, I'll just start off, I'll get to it in a second, but I'll start off by saying that I think this is almost like an alleviating moment. It's almost like I'm feeling free, I'm romanticizing life could have been again, but in this beautiful dance sequence. But then we get to the part where Jake is being attacked by the janitor. And I think that's literally just his internal battle that he's always had with himself, this fractured psyche of like both sides physically fighting when they're always fighting in his brain like that and stopping him from pursuing anything in his life. And that's why he ended up with this at the end.
That's really interesting. I know that you also had an interpretation, but I will say that, just to give a little context from the book, this is the part of the book that I truly thought was unfilmable, because it's almost incomprehensible what's going on. You've already gotten to the point where you realize that she's realizing, she wakes up to the idea that she is fictional. Like, so she has that realization that she's fictional, whether she's wholly fictional or not, because Yvonne, I know they make it in the movie that Yvonne's the character that's the waitress in the movie. So just seems like a whole cloth. Yvonne, in the book, it almost seems like that is a tether to something that is real about her, that she's trying to hold on to. That was who she really was. You know, that was the part that he couldn't make up. That's why it's the constant calling from Yvonne, because it's that sort of awareness that she was something bigger than what she's living in right now. But when you get to the school, it really turns into this horror story of being stalked by a janitor who's maybe killed the boyfriend, who's trying to kill you, who might be the brother of the boyfriend. It really has this stalkerish quality that is really horrifying. And then they play it different in the movie, because her confrontation with the guys, way more that he's being so kind, he sees her and she just shits on him as being this, like, you know, it's whatever. But she was kind to him. And then we get this scene of this ballet. Yeah. And
so the ballet is supposed to be, I guess, the dance between Curly and I think it was Lori in Oklahoma.
It's Curly Lori.
It's the same dance that they have in that.
We actually see him as the janitor walk by a couple rehearsing that same dance.
And it's the song that he sings at the end is the farmhand song.
From, Judd. Judd from Oklahoma.
Who was also ran in that story.
So in that in the dynamic between those three characters in Oklahoma is that Judd is like the guy that wants Lori. He wants to like interject between her and Curly, and so I do think that's just representative of like how he feels. He's like, again, attributing these exterior plays, movies, things to like how he can define his life is that he feels like the third wheel of like his own life is like he's the third wheel of the part of himself that he wishes could be Curly, that could have had that relationship with that girl, and so he ends up like coming in like and trying to like kill that side of him.
He's the villain.
He's the villain of his own story.
That's literally the name of a Crazy Ex-Girlfriend song that I was going to reference. He's literally the villain of his own story. In his narrative, he is the interloper, he is the reject, he is the killer, he is the disgusting old man lech, but he was also the disgusting kid. You know, there's just so much loathing that that he's trying to attribute to his parents, who might not have done anything besides just be old and try to love him as best as they could. But he's trying to vocalize the fear and externalize a fear and anxiety that is very Kaufman-esque, because it is just loathing. It's just self-loathing. Yeah.
I feel like maybe a slightly different take on the like,
how dare you, Lon?
When I was first coming up with sort of my unified theory of the whole movie, I feel like the ballet scene is very significant to me. It's like the Club Silencio in Millennium. Mulholland Drive moment. Where it's like, this is like the key to unlocking everything else that he's thinking about during the movie. Because to me, it was like you're seeing this idealized version of love, of life, of relationships, this couple dancing, and it's sort of perfect, and it's this beautiful ballet. And even there, when he originally walks by the couple rehearsing in the actual high school hallway, it's awkward. They're kind of like hitting the lockers every now and again. It's clearly two teenagers learning this routine. Whereas when he's imagining it, it's professional ballet dancers, and they're even like gingerly closing the lockers.
Purposely closing the lockers.
it's redone as very refined. And so I think he's having this beautiful vision of young love and perfection and how life is meant to be lived. And then what comes to interrupt it? The reality of who he is, this old, angry, bitter janitor who comes in and ruins it all. Like it messes up the whole scene because he's the self-awareness of being an old man whose best years are behind him and who missed all of these opportunities is the reality, and it kills the fantasy.
Well, that actually leads me to a quick question, which is something we disagree on. I'm not even disagreeing on. I'm at like war with myself about what I believe truly. Do you think that this man was ever in a relationship? Do you think he ever, or do you think he was alone his whole life and that his parents were scared that he was gay? He was really just afraid of.
I do agree with you that his parents may have suggested he was gay, and he may have even had questions about his own sexuality during his life.
He embodies woman, yeah.
I think that's definitely baked in there as part of it. But I just feel like there's too many memories that pivot around things you would only be thinking about and remembering if they had once happened to you. Like, I feel like if you are not a person who's ever dated or had a girlfriend, bringing the girl home to meet your parents. I mean, it may be a thing you idealized as like one day I'd like to do, but you wouldn't have these kinds of specific memories of like your dad embarrassing you by asking about
the arguments. Yeah, they feel very
it feels lived into the point that I feel like he's taken road trips with women before. He's brought women home to meet his parents. Maybe not after 6 or 7 weeks. Maybe not this woman, but I didn't feel like this was like an incel at the end of his life because it wasn't. It's not about rage, and it's not about misogyny, and it's not about women being these perfect creatures that he can never approach. It's more lived in than that. It's more based on real experience. So yeah, I don't think he was like alone forever. I just think maybe he never had a wife, or maybe he didn't ever feel like he found true love or whatever.
You think it was maybe the girl at the beginning?
Good.
Oh, that's kind of how I felt, that he had never found like that true love. He might have had some kind of like superficial relationships where he got a few of those experience out of it. I also think though, it is interesting on the other side, thinking about like, if he did want to, cater to his insecurities and kind of go back home and show his parents like, hi, I have a girlfriend. Look at her. She's right here. That's kind of would be one of those things that he envisions in his mind, because typically for us, like that's not the first thing that I would think when I start a relationship or anything like that. But if you have that insecurity with your parents and with your life in general, maybe you'd be like, I want this relationship and I want to be able to take this person home, this person that I really admire, this intense connection, and be like, look, I found somebody. Yeah.
I mean, it is so funny. Like, at the end of the day, this is a movie as much about love. But if we're saying that this was never really a real woman, I have a theory that the intense connection, the conversation stuff was actually the young girl who used to be a student who we saw while he was a janitor, but a younger janitor who's not with the rash. I think that's why we see them have the same rash. I think that's when she sees him, she recognized his beauty, whatever. Maybe it wasn't a long relationship. Maybe it was only that recognition at that Denny's, that one, or Dairy's, was a couple dates. But that was a relationship he had in his life. But she's not the ideal woman.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's like, to me, that's a perfect explanation, because that also would explain why Tulsi Town stands out in his mind as one of these milestones. Like, if that was where he met his very first girlfriend, or the first girl he ever liked, and they made that connection, that's why he would always go back to Tulsi Town in his memory.
Yeah.
Could be a really horrific movie if his first love was as an old janitor to a high school student.
He makes this analysis though, or he was older, definitely, but he says there are these people you see out of lockstep with reality, and then you see her in the hallway and she's not working, and he goes, and you go on to see them later in life working, blah blah. They'll be at the grocery store, and you can see them carrying them around like a millstone. He is, I think, believe that is somebody that he met and connected to. He just doesn't want to see that as, that's not the idealized self, that wasn't the idealized girl. That is someone who is as sad and out of lockstep and being made fun of and rejected and as alone as he is. And that's not, so whatever connection they had, he doesn't want it almost. Or
and it's being very heavily implied how obsessed he is with movies by like the janitor sitting down watching a Zemeckis rom-com in the middle of like work. Like it's kind of implying he probably loses himself into movies routinely.
You can watch him like agree with what the guy's saying, when she's like, she's a vegan, and he's like, yeah.
He's like, that's how you show your love. You run in there and ruin her job and get her ass.
Don't you notice
one of the final things he sees before dying is also a vintage Tulsi Town commercial, probably from when he was a kid, but displayed like cinematic, on a widescreen, like with curtains, like at a theater. So yeah, clearly I think it's baking in movies are important, and part of how he thinks about himself in his past is like cinematically.
I think it's very well said. I mean, God, there's so much to unpack here, but I think that there's so much that you were pointing out a little bit earlier, Eric, when we were watching it, about the glasses, even so much as like can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's important to note.
And yeah, I just something with like specifically the framing of like certain shots when like we were with his parents. At the dinner scene, again, we're talking about the dinner scene a lot, which is that when she, going back to the idea that his parents kind of like couldn't really comprehend like the art that he was trying to show them, like the scenery art. The framing is like she says like, you wouldn't see yourself in these scenes, right? But it means something to you when you're seeing it. And like we're framed as like from behind him. First, like we see like the back of his head watching the scene, then like quickly we lose him entirely, and then we're just watching the scene of the three of them in the shot together. And the way it's framed, that she's in the center between them, and she's like on her knees with like these kind of baggy clothes, this baggy sweater. She looks like a kid, like trying to show like her parents like something that's like special to her, and they can't get it. And she's in that scene specifically. That's the first time we see her pull out her glasses, and she's wearing them to show in the picture. And those glasses are rounder. They're like kind of like large, and like they're like kind of like framed like a little thinner with like a red frame. They look like glasses that like a kid might have. And then the second time that happens is when they're in the living room, and she is taking the phone call. She puts on the glasses again, but they're more square.
They look like the Black
and
Janners.
They're thicker, and they're black frames, and like look like frames that like an adult might have. And I think those are just like, again, like representative of like his different points in life with his parents, trying to comprehend different things with them.
Right.
And again, then we that transitions into them having the chocolate cake.
Yeah, the head on the shoulder.
And he's saying David Thewlis goes into the whole thing about his mom, how he misses her, her laughter and her comedy. And then again, we have the same exact thing of like Jesse Plemons sitting in the corner watching the scene play out. First it's his head, then we lose him entirely. Then we're watching
her head. Together. She puts her head on David Thewlis's shoulder.
Yeah,
like that's the way when he's talking about missing the mom, and that's what you would do to your dad. That would be the connection you have to your dad.
So yeah, I do think that there's a chunk of the film that is representative of like this girl that he kind of like idealizes and wishes he could have like around his parents, like, or the fear of having her around his parents. But I do think she does also, as it should be, it's a mixture of that and himself being a lot of his own like insecurities to like this person, like, and putting her in place as to like what these things mean to him. It's kind of like, again, that disconnect that you can't help but even when you're trying to fantasize about something, you like project yourself into it, and like you start to kind of like place yourself into like what that person would be acting as if they were yourself.
I think there's something here. We've been talking a lot about the negativity, and of course, this movie I do believe should come with like a trigger warning, because it is it's accessible to everyone. People are going to be turning it on. I think there should be like some, especially considering the state of the world right now, there should be some warnings about suicidal ideation, about harmful thinking, about self-harm, that probably maybe should be at the top of this film, because it gets into some really dark places, and it really does. But there's also some real beauty, and there's some real moments, and I think that she begins to represent, or at least the Jesse Plemons side at some point represents, the empathy and the beauty of not having to be this genius who feels stifled by his upbringing or whatever, but just the smallness and the stuff that doesn't have to feel claustrophobic, but just the small moments of sadness or connection he had with his parents, that are, I love the way that your mom laughed, her sense of humor, the way that like it comes out, it reads so scary, so anxiety prone, but there are these beautiful little ways, when the night on the handing off scene.
His mind, in some ways, he's sort of so focused on achievement or things he wanted that he never had. And I mean, I think that's very human. That's super relatable. But there are moments where he reflects on what really matters, quote unquote, or the relationships that he built that were meaningful in their own way that he can't even deny. Like there is that one point where Jesse Buckley says to Jesse Plemons, like, "You're a really good son, and I feel like I'm noticing how much you care, and you're a good son." And he goes, "Well, thanks, I appreciate that. People don't really notice like the small things." And there's even the other moment when he's talking to her about her rabies assignment, the essay that she's got to, and he takes a little moment to be like, see, what a good boyfriend. Like, I listen, I pay attention. And even later, Jessie Buckley echoes that in voiceover where she's like, he does always listen when I'm talking. He's engaged. He cares about my work. So, I mean, I do think that even amidst all of the downer, depressing regret stuff, there are moments where he's having lighter thoughts or he's feeling okay about things. And like, again, which is very relatable. It's not always all negative, even when you're in the grips of depression. Like, there are moments where you feel a little better.
And it's really great because it's something. Oh, it's something where, since the movie is pretty dark and pretty heavy, it's those moments of levity that bring more weight on either side, honestly. Like, it's something where it's not so heartening where we feel kind of like distasteful about it, especially with these themes, exactly what you were saying, Drew. Right now, this is a hard watch. Like, as beautiful as it is, visually stunning, the dialogue's incredible. This can be a hard watch for a lot of people, but those moments of levity, a lot that Lon pointed out, those add so much depth to the film. They add that other layer, really, and just like the beauty of life and the beauty of reflection and how not everything is easy to look back on, and reflecting on yourself, because we're seeing his insecurities taking over basically his entire life and stopping him from a lot of stuff. And he's reflecting on that. It's almost like he's going to be able to realize that, even though he does end up possibly ending things. I feel like he's getting reflection at the end of like, I kind of did this myself. I wish I could have done this differently. And that's why something that I think is interesting is when he is looking back, or he's like in his whole dream sequence of the relationship, she has an iPhone, and obviously at that age, since he's a janitor now, it's like, what timeline, when is this taking place? Because if this was back when he was younger, they wouldn't have iPhones. But it's almost like, yeah, and it's almost like he's reflecting on this and not just looking back. It's like he's looking like he could just de-age himself and put himself into like modern day, rather just like start over almost. Like, if he ended things, it'd possibly be like a rejuvenation of his life or something like that, where he would be able to like just completely start over.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting that, like, you know, he's having all these aspirations and stuff, but we see no, like you mentioned, there's no qualifying event that kept him in his small town, whatever, except that his parents, and it always goes back to his parents, even though he doesn't subscribe to that's Freudian psychology BS. We're not getting anything other than the crippling anxiety and his connection to his parents that would have kept him from doing anything. I do think there's the reason it's so sad, and this about the girl and missing the girl, like, yes, she's a projection, but there's no way that there's not an emotional thing that he feels unless he was once in love, like in an actual relationship with somebody in which there was a back and forth. You notice that they don't really talk to each other, they talk at each other, or she's doing a voiceover about what she thinks of him, which is just his projection of all the self-loathing when she's trying to go leave and she's just cycling up and down the stairs, and it's just sort of like, he needs me to be this, he needs me to be that. Yeah, and that's what she's realizing about herself as a projection. But B, sort of, when you're in a relationship, you sometimes think, are they thinking that about me? Are they thinking I'm too needy? Is this is the kind of thing you only get the kind of self-doubt about once you're in a relationship, I feel like. So there's sort of like almost like a silver lining, as his dad likes to say, about all this self-loathing, which is it does imply that he was once involved with somebody, maybe the girl at the Burr place or someone else, but he wasn't alone for all of his life, or else he even, you know, because he's not able to conceptualize and have this imagination where he's going off and winning these awards. He never leaves the town because he has no context for a bigger world. Yeah, you know, the most he ever gets is a high school auditorium, like a speech.
I think, and we were talking about this a little when we were rewatching it yesterday. I think the metaphor of the abandoned house with the new swing set in front of it actually ties into this very nicely. It's regret in that now he's old and he feels like it's too late. Like, he can't start again. He doesn't have a new chance to find somebody new or to chase his dreams more relentlessly, or to leave town. Because it's pointless to build a swing set in front of he's the abandoned house. What are you going to, you're going to reshuffle the deck chairs on the Titanic. It's too late. We're already at the end. And so I think that's a lot of the the core sadness of the movie, but it's also significant that it's still a debate in his head. He doesn't just pass that house and go, how stupid, a new swing set in front of an abandoned house, and then move on. There's a discussion about, well, why not? Maybe new people are going to move in. Maybe that house isn't condemned forever. So it's still playing out in his head. It's not decided finally one way or the other. And so there's always a little room for hope.
Yeah, I think there is room for hope. There's a room for hope that even comes in the form of like how scared the woman, the Burr is. She goes, you know, you don't have to move forward in time. You can stay here. Whether that means stay in the car and just let this thing overwhelm you, let you be overwhelmed by, or like overtaken by memories. You don't have to move forward. Does he choose to move forward? What does moving forward in time mean? Even if it means getting older, maybe it means continuing to live. I don't know.
Yeah, like what she says, you know, we're stationary. Time passes through us.
Yes.
You know, again, time is like a big factor as for the character, and I guess like the fear of time and what you guys are saying, like the fear of like being too late and like you're past the point of no return.
Well, and also like who would remember him? And I think that's one of these things that he, you know, with the sheep and stuff. That there's this idea that he's the last loop, and he's made a decision to be the last chain in something for reasons to stand apart because he feels so ugly. He feels so like unnoticed or whatever. But we don't know. The woman, there's several moments where people see each other. He sees her, like the janitor. The woman at the Burr sees him and sees that he's beautiful. You know, like that you make impressions on people without even meaning to because you're so caught up in your own, you know, knowledge of self. We don't know that if there were people out there who really truly didn't see him and his brilliance. His parents might have, you know?
Yeah. And I wanted to talk about like because Sabrina had mentioned it. Yeah, like the last scene with the audience and everything. That's clearly like a callback to like an homage to Beautiful Mind.
I didn't get that at all. I just thought he was doing a speech. I was like, it's literally him just verbatim quoting again.
Yeah. And so he's doing a Beautiful Mind at the end, and kind of just reciting it before we get into the final song. I do think that's again part of him attributing the arts and like the craft of other things to like how he would like to define himself to other people. Like he wishes he could go out on a bang with like this really great speech and this really great song.
What a weird song to pick though, because the song he picks is a song that is from the like villain's point of view. Again,
I think that's maybe again that's probably what he has just decided. He's like reconciled. Oh, she's gone. Yeah, she's out.
Oh, sorry.
She probably.
But
she said she might have to come back.
He knew Oklahoma because he saw them rehearsing the school play, and he heard it on the radio as well. Or theoretically, they hear it on the radio, so theoretically he would have heard it. So it could just be that that's one of the songs that he knows.
Yeah, but that's not the radio song. But here's the thing about that song. That song is really interesting. It is the villain song. It is not the good guy song. This is like, and it's a really sad song, but they play it way more sadder in the movie. Like it is a longful, regretful song. In the movie, in Play Oklahoma, it's just sort of like, I'm so lonely and I'm going to go get that girl and I'm gonna blah blah and damn that farmhand.
And yeah, I think it's it's kind of like both true. It's like he probably did hear it like in the day where he's cleaning up, and that's the play they happen to be rehearsing.
But Jesus, remember it's Jesus. Did he used to listen to Christian talk radio?
No, but he's watching them.
No,
and then it's cool.
Okay, got it.
Hear that Oklahoma song in the car, like Jesse Buckley and Jesse Plemons, and then
that would be impossible. Because the Oklahoma song would never play on the radio. That's not like that's not Oklahoma. That's
talking
like
about how he likes musicals.
All I'm pointing out is Oklahoma runs through his head, and even when he's having these memories or fantasies about this car trip, he's still playing Oklahoma songs in his head. Clearly, Oklahoma the musical is a thing that recurs in his mind, and those songs get stuck in his head.
And again, if we're going by if we're going by the the idea that this is,
I'm trying to.
It might be asleep.
There you go. Yeah, I think it's the most recent play. I think it's the most recent musical that he's seen.
So he's watching it that day, and like if we're going by the logic that this is like all happening within like one day or like one sitting, then that that happens when like you're down really, like like you you listen to like a sad song, and that song sticks in your head, and so like that might be the song that goes through his head as like he's kind of fading away. And that's the point when he's like decided like I am the villain of my story, and so like that's the song that he latches onto.
But it's not. What's funny is it's almost again it's him being able to take the objective or the more empathetic, the idealized version of her, which is what if this villain song about giving up the girl? But the line is I'm not going to give her up and I'm not going to stop trying, but I am going to go out. It's like just such a weird beat in Oklahoma, but like it's almost like him seeing it from a sympathetic point of view that makes it a lone, like a ballad. That's like like in the song, I don't remember Oklahoma. I can't recall it that well, but this is like the Gaston of the story. But he's turned it into this melancholy ballad that's beautiful and haunting and isn't unsympathetic. It is a song that like this audience is clapping and applauding for, you know, that they would love, like, because they accept him as not the villain. He's turned the villain role. He's able to see himself finally as like the sad tragedy of him is that he was not the villain.
Yeah, so Sabrina, we were talking about the ending with like the song and like the Oklahoma thing. What was your read on like the final speech and then leading into the song?
Well, I think obviously he's taking from like A Beautiful Mind, and I think he's putting himself into these scenarios of what he thinks he could have possibly accomplished. Even when he says like this is like because of you and everything like that, and it's pretty haunting because obviously I love that everybody. Because what he knows and what he's experienced as a janitor in the school is like the high school theater. That's what he's around and that's what he's paying attention to. He's stopping and looking at them. He's admiring the song. And I love that everybody has that kind of like old, really like very dramatic, like high school theater makeup in terms of old. It's not good. It's not like, it's not movie makeup. And I love that. And the way he's kind of in front of his mom is on stage with him, his father's in the crowd, the young woman is in the crowd. It's kind of addressing all of these like elements of his life. And then with the woman, that's kind of where I think it's like the amalgamation of relationships and what he wanted them to be. When he saw that woman, and this is the main he's taking off of, but adding in experiences that he's had with like his superficial relationships that he didn't really connect with. I think he's using her, this like perfect woman that he saw and hasn't really left his mind all back then. Kind of being like making himself have that one final like triumphant memory of like, even though it's fake, it's like, I could have done this. Maybe I'm going to imagine that I do it. And it's kind of like a conclusion to his life and his story in the way that he wanted to, especially since he's manipulating this entire film in the way that we perceive every single character. We look at his parents a certain way because this is how he's seeing his parents. I think he's doing that again to us, is like, this is the way I want my story to end. This is what I wanted. So I'm going to have my story end this way in my own mind. That's kind of how I took it. And I think it worked really, really well. I think it's definitely one of those, this is like a perfect final scene and it's a final conclusion to Jake's life.
Yeah. I think there's something really interesting to be said there too. Like, it is not, he's thought of himself as the side character, the interloper, and everyone else is like, he's not even the main character in his own life story. He is the girl watching this guy that she wants to break up with. He is the farmhand bad guy in the play. But that final speech and that final recognition is the acknowledgement maybe that he couldn't acknowledge himself his entire life, which is that he's the main character. He's the story. And the only thing, the real tragedy is that he's seen himself as the sideline, as a person whose opinions don't matter, as the person who other people project onto as being horrific and awful and whatever. But there's nothing else except him. There's just him, and he could have loved himself more and accepted himself more and accomplished. I mean, who's to say that being a janitor isn't a good accomplishment? It's like he just loathes it. He sees it as representative of creepy old men. But like, who's to say that that wasn't a life that was beautifully lived, that he took care of his parents, he was a good son, that he didn't, do anything to, women. He never, and that's not that that's the barometer of like how to be a good person, but like he respected women. And he has respect for female intelligence and the female mind. He was a brilliant person who kept to himself, but there isn't, I don't know, there's a beauty to that doesn't necessarily, I don't think we can take at face value this thing that can bring on the day he wants to kill himself.
Right.
As the sum total of this man's life.
I was sort of thinking about this movie. It's a little bit of a mirror of Albert Brooks's Defending Your Life, which I know is a movie that Drew and I have talked about before. That's kind of the hopeful vision. Like, you could get to the end of your life, look back and realize it was filled with anxiety and regret and things that you didn't do, but then you have like a second chance. And I sort of feel like at the end of Defending Your Life, Albert Brooks finally gets over his fear and his hesitation to break the rules by jumping onto the tram and going back to Earth to be resurrected with Meryl Streep. And I think this scene is almost this movie's weird, not as hopeful, but still kind of hopeful version of that this is also the moment that he gets over himself. He accepts love. He puts himself on stage. He really goes for it and tries. Even in the moment of death, this is the moment where he decides to get over all of that fear and like embrace life. And even though, unlike defending your life, he's probably not going to come back to life. Although maybe if you read the car turning over,
he
does.
I think that's hopeful. I think there's a hopeful beat that they added in.
But I think that's how I read that scene, is like, this would be the moment where finally, now that he's at the brink of death, he's going to be like, what if I did charge the stage and just start singing my own song and giving my own speech and accepting all of the love that I wanted all these years that I never felt like I got.
Well, and get celebrated and get recognized and everything that he feels like that he had a lack of throughout his entire life.
Exactly.
Like, look at how parochial his dreams and aspirations really are, though. He never thinks about what it would be like to go to the city, what it would have been like to be a physicist, to be well-renowned. I mean, it literally is. It doesn't have to be that sad about this man who never achieved his full potential. If his full potential in his own mind was literally just getting the acceptance of his parents, about being recognized by these people. I mean, I really do think there's a hopeful note, but there's a reason Netflix, you watch the entire credit sequence and it's just quiet, and then there's the sound of a car turning over like that. It's not a new car driving up to the place. It's a car turning over new leaf, whatever. I did read that as maybe he turned the car off. He wasn't going to die of heart. He was originally going to die of carbon monoxide poisoning, but he was getting too scattered in his thinking. I'm starting to come around to the idea that, maybe he wasn't losing his faculties as much as he thought. He was literally dying of carbon monoxide poisoning, and he was so scared of losing his faculties and trying to go out on that note. But he's realizing he can still achieve dreams. He can still be that. If he frames it in the terms of being the main character of his own story, there is still life to live. And his dreams are not out of reach, because his dreams are just being in this town and being accepted. Possibly.
That's exactly how I felt with kind of that ending, especially.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm split. I like this interpretation very much. I would like to totally go with it, but I do also feel like it could sort of be just like the clue. Like, if you get to the very end, here's what really happened. He turned on.
But then why give it? Why would that be the thing, and not somebody scream, "Oh my God, the janitor!" Or like, why not a thing?
Well,
why that noise?
You scream, "Oh my God, the janitor!" This would be a subtle way to let you know if you made it all the way to the end. Like, yep, the car is what killed him, or whatever. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. I like your version much better.
I think it's purposefully, ambiguous in a certain sense, and like I do think, like I know in the book, like he just like stabs himself, like that's how he goes out. So it's very much more cut and dry that he does like kill himself.
I see what you did there, cut and dry.
But no, I do think that in this version, Kaufman wanted to have that sort of ambiguity to say like, the journey in itself is more reminiscent, it's more I think believable in a way, to see that he's slowly going out through hypothermia or carbon monoxide poisoning, and that's
gotta be carbon. It gotta be right. That's the varnish.
He's also so hypothermia is playing a
you're right,
in it somehow.
And she mentions when she's in the car alone waiting for him in the school, she actually starts wondering aloud about how long does it take, what happens when you get hypothermia. So I feel like that's him in the car dying of carbon monoxide poisoning, starting to feel very cold and thinking.
What's the varnish smell though? Where she goes, it's not varnish.
That's carbon monoxide. Well, actually, carbon monoxide doesn't smell, so I don't know. Good question.
Oh, you're right. Wait, that's true. Carbon monoxide doesn't smell.
It's odorless. That's why it's so deadly.
No. Oh yeah. Also, wait, how would you close up the tailpipe so you would die of carbon monoxide in the middle of the street? I mean, in the middle of the.
It's true. We don't see. You would have a tube going from the tailpipe into the car, and we don't see that, which I thought could just be an artistic choice.
What is the varnish?
So yes, it would be hypothermia. Probably more likely than the carbon monoxide poisoning, but then the line about the varnish is really interesting, and it's the one thing that I think
she goes, it's not varnished.
Yeah, well, she says they're painting in the back varnish, that's why it smells, and as she's leaving, she's like, it's not the varnish that smells.
It's not the varnish.
It's not actually the varnish. That's not why.
I mean, but it could also be. It could be a whole bunch of things. I mean, if maybe that's her way of metaphorically saying you're not really here right now. This is just a memory. This isn't even a Tulsi town anymore. Maybe it's next to yeah, I don't know. I thought it was carbon monoxide too, but now that I think about it, that doesn't make sense.
Oh, such a warning, right? Today, that's not carbon monoxide. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Sabrina.
You guys.
Oh no, it was just frozen. No, I was waiting because you froze, so I didn't know if it was me or if it was you.
No, I mean, did you catch that line about varnish? Like the thing about like or that line? What do you think was happening that they were trying to warn him, or that part of him was trying to be warned? I don't know if that one was, or the Dairy Queen experience is somebody trying to say, hey, just stay, like, just slip into death. It's easier. You don't have to move forward in time. But it also seems to be warning him. You know that smells not varnish.
Yeah.
What is that smell? What is that moment?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I think that's the line that I'm kind of like still
Antifreeze?
picking out the most.
What smells like varnish? Yeah, I mean, sorry, just because like Sabrina, you said all the details are important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's definitely because I also just like thinking of varnish as like a finishing agent, like just like, you know, when you're like floors, something like that. I'm trying to think now, and because I did think smell, and now I'm changing that to like maybe just thinking varnish as like symbolic. I don't know, is that kind of like the last step, like when you're varnishing over like floors or cabinets or anything like that. So I don't know if it's like,
but also paint
like
smells
Googling to
like
see if
varnish.
you die. Like maybe you smell something weird, like, you know, when you have a stroke, you smell oranges. Like maybe there's a thing about hypothermia and
but like both, he's always had these fantasies about being a painter, going back to painting. Paint smells like
right.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely paint does smell like varnish. Varnish is such a specific like thing to say you smell. Like I can't remember the last movie that brought up varnish. So
I think you're right. Paint thinner is getting closer, and I think maybe that's hypothermia trying to. Yeah.
This movie is so great, though.
Maybe there was.
Oh no! He's a janitor. He's varnishing the floors of the school all
day.
Right,
but she's saying it's not varnish. What you're smelling isn't varnish. Yeah.
But I think it is, and she's keeping the illusion alive. Like he's coming back to reality, smelling his own clothes and realizing he smells like a janitor. And she's like, "No, we're varnishing. It's the back, whatever."
There's a sign. It's also apparently a sign that there's a gas leak. That if you smell if you smell acetone, it's a sign.
Not in a car.
Yeah, but they're saying I'm looking it up right now. It's like if you smell varnish, it's yes relating to the paint, but it's a leak of some sort of a gas leak that they're implying that some sort of maybe he's inhaling, maybe it's inhalants of some sort. It's some sort of poison gas.
So there's ways for like antifreeze to kind of like, I don't know if that smell would be like similar to that, but when I looked it up, it's like, what does it smell like coming through vents, like inside a car, things like that. Like I don't know if there's something he was doing there, just because obviously he's dealing with like a lot of snow and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I have no idea if that's what, and because they're saying it's not varnish, so maybe it's something else that he's working with, and it's like antifreeze or.
Yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to come back to the idea that some aspect of the way he's killing himself is causing a sharp smell, because there's also, remember with the dog at one point, he's like, the dog stinks. I'm so sorry. The dog is so stinky. And she's like, I don't even smell anything. So there's something, he's experiencing something in real time that's smell related that is intruding on all of these memories.
People are saying when I Google, so not to be like Googling in real time, being a little detective, when it's coming up, like, what do you smell before you die? Can you smell death coming? And varnish is one of these smells.
So,
okay.
So I did find that, I guess, in the book, the book details that throughout his day at the school, he is painting the floors with varnish without any protection.
So he might be done. Yeah.
And the fumes contributing to like his his mind and his sense of awareness.
So really, we're just seeing in a lot of aspects where like Kaufman took this source material, is like, let me ambiguity this up a little bit more.
Yes.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
Which is beautiful. Like that's my exact flavor. That's my favorite flavor. Ambiguity.
I love it. Yeah, it's sort of like when you Google varnish smell. It's one of the things that just comes up is paramedics describe what death smells like.
Yeah.
So maybe it's just as easy as that. It's not varnish. It's death, but it is also varnish. Quite literally.
It's not varnish, but it's also varnish.
Yeah, I mean, I think that right. Like in his fantasy, maybe it could be whatever. But yeah, I think it probably is some indication of like, he's a janitor, so he's walking around kind of smelling like varnish all the time.
To address what BB is saying, this was my read last night, that this was a man who's deciding to end life on his own terms before his faculties leave him, and therefore there's something to be said about that, and that's why I do think there should be a suicidal ideation warning on this movie. I'm starting to come around through this conversation and thinking, and because of that last thing, that like he wasn't losing his faculties. That's just like as much as he thinks he is. That's just another iteration of his self-loathing. And that like in thinking about even being able to dream of getting that award, which is not something he was even able to hope to think about. He would never allow himself to dream about giving a speech in which he's in front of everyone, because that's not the kind of person he is. He's always dreams about being the loser or whatever. That in doing that dream, that specific thing, and singing that song as a heart-wrenching ballad, as a set of as the killer of a a child or a teenage couple, he is that varnish smell. It's not varnish. You know what that is. You can just stay here. You can get stuck in time with us. And the pig saying, we all become particles. It's literally him making maybe another decision. He's not losing his mind. He was losing his mind because he was cold, hypothermia, dying, and he doesn't need to take control. There's no need for when you're scared, you want to take immediate action. When you're anxious and terrified, that's what you want to do. She's thinking about ending things. She needs to get out. She needs to go. But there's a part of him that's like, you don't need to do that. You shouldn't he keeps talking about the liquor that the dad keeps saying. You shouldn't make decisions while drunk. People should keep in mind like that they're not under that they're not thinking clearly, and that they're not in the right headspace when they're under duress. Yeah.
Well, the dad too is always like, stay the night. I'll get you a nightgown. Sleep in this bed. Stay the night. Don't go. You don't have to go. Like that push and pull of the chains, and we got to leave. And I think that definitely goes towards what you're saying. And like, it is this, those two characters represent this duality in his mind that he's sort of resolving over the course of the movie.
And I think he resolves it by being neither. He's neither Jesse Plemons, who's just going about the rote memorization of his day, and he's only being seen through the gaze of his worst version of like his self-loathing, and she's the one who wants to die. I think at the end of the day, he's reconciled between the two of them, and he's Jesse Plemons wearing the old man makeup. He's Jesse Plemons like putting on the persona of the old man and seeing it through a sympathetic, loving view, or an empathetic view of what that is. And I don't know. There's something about that speaks neither to the we need to go, we need to get out. I think about ending things because Jesse Plemons won't even hear it. Every time she goes, I'm thinking about, he pulls off and wants to go into another memory. This is the reconciliation of not living in your memory and not living in this death trip, but acceptance.
Yeah. Because I mean, he's saying, in the beginning of the film, she is like saying, I'm thinking about ending things, and like he can like almost like clearly hear like what she's thinking.
He's like, what are you thinking?
And like every time she starts, he like cuts her off. He's like, no, like don't. What do you think? About let's talk about this, and as it moves on, like he stops like interrupting her frequently. And
at one point before they get to the school, he's almost like, you're right, what's the point, why even bother doing that? And so he, as the person who's in emotionally control of all these memories, when he starts to lose it, that's when she becomes the empathy that he does have, and the true goodness he does have, where he sees that he's beating up himself and that he thinks life is worth living, and he's able to be like, hey, like that's a dangerous line of thinking, and you are going really hard on yourself, and nothing's that hopeless,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I agree.
Clearly, guys, by the way, there's tons to watch here and feature presentations up here. I was about to Google what deadly things smell like varnish, but I don't feel like putting on a list. I'm pretty sure the Avengers Endgame had a varnish scene with Groot making him look shiny. I mean, guys, I don't want to, I've already kept you guys here 2 hours, but I don't know, like, if there's any sort of takeaway thoughts. I mean, this is a movie that begs to be revisited, and I highly suggest you do so. And I highly suggest that you do so with the eye towards empathy and not seeing this. It comes off as very tense and very scary and a psychological horror thriller because we're seeing it through his worst vision of himself or his worst take on reality. But I do believe that there is some reconciliation there at the end that is a little bit uplifting, whether or not he's chosen to do that or not. But would you recommend this movie to people right now? I guess that's a good question. Like, is that it? Is it?
I have a lot. Whenever anybody's asked me, they're like, "Should I watch it?" I'm like, "Yes, I think a lot of people should watch it." But this, and this, like, it's a little bit heavy. It definitely is going to make you kind of even just like think about like existence and reality and your life and all your past experiences and your relationship with yourself, your own anxieties. It makes you do that. So it's things that I tell every single person whenever I recommend it, but I still would, because I think it's a story of regret ultimately for most of it, and that acceptance. And I think it shows that we should all be a little kinder to ourselves, and we should all kind of have this perception of ourselves that isn't so negative. Like, don't stop yourself from doing something just because you're afraid you're going to fail, or you're afraid of even doing it in the first place. That's gonna honestly affect you in a negative way just by doing that. Like, you're not going to go anywhere. You're going to stay pretty stagnant, like he does throughout the entire film, or at least the way that he feels he does, by staying at the same house he grew up in and never really leaving his bubble of life and never really experiencing anything new. And then we see the flashbacks going from like the city back to where he lives. So it's more of like that success of breaking out from where you grew up or where you've known your whole life, and then coming back just to visit. And it's that difference, which isn't actually like failure or success at all. It's just the way that you perceive life and you perceive everything around you. That's really the biggest thing.
I think that's exactly right. And I think the whole idea that his parents have really never criticized what he is or what he is, except that the fact that he's alone, and they wish that he had not been alone. I do believe that's a true thing they think, because look, if his mom had no one to take care of her except the dad and the son, and then the son was able to be there for the dad, and he's kept himself from having anyone in his life to connect to because of his insecurities and loathing. If he had people in his life, he would have other voices in his head. You are able to have voices in your head that I know I do sometimes, where I can hear myself beating up on myself, and I'm like, but if Eric was here, he would be like, stop doing that. Or if Lon was here, he'd be like, you're being way too hard on yourself. And this movie coming out right now during a certain time when we're all very alone, like many of us are like living alone. I'm not sure if I could have handled this movie last year after like my car accident, when I spent basically a year like in solitary confinement leading up to quarantine. I mean, as much as I love Charlie Kaufman, if I was going back like a year, I could not like in good faith recommend this film to myself, because I was just kind of living with these other voices in my head that were only circling negative thinking. So it's hard to be like, yes, everyone should absolutely watch this film. I would watch it with like an extreme caveat of like, Charlie Kaufman like unintentionally tapped in, just being Charlie Kaufman, he always deals with the issues of being alone, but he unintentionally kind of hit the zeitgeist of, we all kind of feel like that right now, I think. The one upshot being that like the playing field has been leveled. Everyone is feeling alone right now. You can't be like, everyone else is having fun and I'm stuck here.
Yeah.
Like it might be
some people still hanging out. They're having fun.
Yeah. Some
who
like,
needs a
nothing's
mask?
going on.
Both parties.
Oklahoma's
And
being performed somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no.
I was just going to say, I mean, in terms of like recommending this movie, like one thing I would just like to say is kind of a final thought. Like, there's a lot of movies like this that I think people feel like they have to solve it to enjoy it, or like the goal is to like Nolan it and like put the puzzle together and be like, there it is, 4 timelines, and this is how Inception goes. And like, there are those movies, and I like a good puzzle. I like a good puzzle box movie as much as anyone else. But like, there are also movies that I think it's totally okay, and it doesn't make you stupid or shallow or superficial to like let it wash over you, especially the first or second time you watch it.
You are Jesse Plemons. You don't have to like, you don't get it all to love it.
That kind of experience where you're watching it and you're like demanding answers and you're like trying to solve the movie, like that could really ruin an experience like this one, which, as we've all been saying for this whole 2 hours, is purposefully ambiguous and like purposefully subverts your ability to like put the puzzle together and like solve the Rubik's Cube or whatever. So like I do think a lot more people than maybe are enjoying this movie could enjoy this movie. I mean, aside from everything you guys said, which is totally accurate about mental illness and suicidal ideation, and like I think all of those issues are really strongly in play. But I would also say to people who tend to not love this kind of like more ambiguous art film, like it's okay to like relax that part of your brain for 2 hours and just be like, maybe I'm not going to unlock everything that this is trying to say or figure out exactly what the narrative is. And that's okay to just experience it and go with it. And then put on Umbrella Academy, and that's easier to follow.
You don't have to be Drew in middle or in at the end of high school being like, come to me if you need it, Mulholland Drive explained, because I've got that shit on lock. Like, you don't. Right. Yeah, this is the kind of movie that begs for a different interpretation. But I think ultimately, maybe my takeaway is that this was it starts out as a horror story about like how much he hates himself, and it turns into a validation that life was beautiful and was worth living, and that there was something there. So, I mean, I guess that's my takeaway. I would strongly, like, before I recommend this to anybody I know right now, I would strongly, like, advise a warning. Like, more so than I think that any other piece of pop culture or culture that I can think of, this requires a trigger warning.
Yeah.
Aaron, like, what would you sort of any final thoughts, takeaway on this?
I mean, all of the above, for sure. I mean, and first of all, thank you for allowing me to be a part of this discussion.
Of course.
It's been really, really
so
incredible.
Happy to have you.
Yeah, I've been happy to be here, and hopefully add an occasional like nugget here or two. But like, I think that I would definitely recommend this movie. It's a huge lesson in patience, because even things like how the characters talk, it's like no characters make all these references and talk. Like, it's like, hold on, patience. It will be like it's not Charlie Kaufman forgetting how to write here. It's that these are, like, it all made sense by the end. It's a huge lesson in empathy, huge lesson in patience. Just, I mean, and it's just like, my brother is that guy who always has to figure out every aspect of everything. And when things are ambiguous to him, it means that the writer didn't know what they wanted to do. And like, if there's not answers to every single question, it's bad. And, I ended up talking to him after this, and he was, I was like, you like couldn't stand it, could you? He's like, actually, no. Like, I watched it, like, I tried to watch this, and he said your style as he was talking to me. I was like, oh, so like non-judgmental and allowing the story to like play out. He's like, yeah, pretty much. And I was like, that's kind of the crux of like just allowing your own story to play out and being non-judgmental about yourself too. I mean, it's very, I mean, and this is a movie that requires extreme patience and extreme non-judgment.
Watching. It requires more than one viewing. Absolutely.
Yeah, it requires more. It requires seeing things from more than just your own original perspective, which is something right now we're all doing as we get onto our social medias every day, that we've garnered into our echo bubbles, and that we see things through. And then we like the same people we like every day. We dislike the same people we dislike every day. We're still paying attention to both those aspects for whatever. And it's just like, we're all in a rush to judge ourselves, other people. And this movie, if you're in a rush to judge it, you're going to hate it 5 minutes in and be like, oh, this aspect ratio, it's two people in a car again. It's this, it's that. Like, it's like, oh, it's so Charlie Kaufman. Oh, that's the same shot from Eternal Sunshine. It's like,
that's really fascinating, because I really truly feel like our country right now, because our world right now, because of everything that's going on, is suffering from like extreme empathy disorder. Like it is a lack of empathy. We have inability, because we are all stuck at home, and we have lost the ability to empathize, to see what the world is like from somebody else's perspective.
Exactly. We've gotten addicted to our own perspectives. This movie, it's like so crazy how perfect the timing was. For me, this was like a empathetic, like CPR resuscitation for me. I live in a house by myself here in DC. I work with dogs every day. I don't talk to people other than on streams, essentially, at this point, for the most part. And I'm not going to go into everything that's been going on with my mom, but I've shared with all of you off stream. And it's like, my mom's been going through some major health and mental issues, including with memory right now, and her perceptions of time and all of this. There's no such thing for me as hitting too close to home. It was extremely validating, actually, to see these things happening.
And so you found like this to be beautiful.
Yeah, I felt really validated.
That's beautiful. Maybe I would recommend this to myself of last year when my grandmother was dying. I was all these feelings of being so. Yeah,
you'd be surprised, and it's just like, I'm only recommending this to people I know, and I'm not recommending it to people I know who I shouldn't be recommending it to at this point, because it does require a lot of capacity and for you to stick with it the whole way to get the message at the end. Because if you if you got lost at this spot or this spot, or get triggered at this spot, which is totally understandable. I mean, even last night with Sabrina's stream, someone had an issue with Eternal Sunshine. I was like, whoa, well, like a really sharp issue with at a part that I would have had no idea about. So this movie, I have a ton of ideas of parts where that spot would be. So it's like, but for me, I felt that hopefulness from the beginning, and when that car revved at the end, I mean, it really like lifted my entire like spirit, from viewing this as a completely different movie. It's really crazy to me. So that car starting really was turning over something in me for sure. So I mean, I really, and then this is like a perfect little capper on everything else. Like, I mean, I like this conversation and getting to hear Eric's thoughts on just like the structure, like something I've never edited a thing in my life. Like you
have to go back and watch the movie for the editing. Like it's so crazy.
It's endlessly rewatchable, as cliche as that sounds. And this, I knew after the first time, the second time, the third time, I loved this movie, and it was going to be one of these movies that I'm going to bring up. It's in my fabric. It really feels like it ripped from the fabric of who I am in a lot of ways. Like it feels like it's made for everybody too at the same point. Which again, it's like, and I'll shut up here finally, but it's like the janitor, like realizing it's like I am, a character in this story. I'm not the only character in this story, and I do belong, and like these people do welcome, and like it's like with this, it's like I'm not the only one who's reacting to this, and like from a totally, like when I started this conversation, I'm like, oh, like your extreme experience is what matters for this movie. I'm realizing how actually completely false that is.
It's not that it's false, but I think that it's something that it's universal.
Right.
Like people go to death of their.
Yeah, it's universal. I guess.
And I mean, they have that line in the movie where like she finishes the poem, and he's like, "Wow, like it feels like it was made for me." Feels like it was made for me. She's like, I guess that's what we hope for, right? We hope for some sort of universality in the work.
And you found the poem, and what's interesting about the poem is it's a very modern. It was written like a couple years ago. This is not like an old poem.
5 years ago, yeah, it's from 5 years ago. That book.
So clearly, he's still able to enjoy art and stuff. I mean, there's so beauty in the world. It's so hard to when I think about, and this will be the final thing I say, or actually, you know what? I'll just shut up for a second. Wait, Eric, would you recommend this film?
No, I'm just kidding.
Nothing to talk about.
No, people have asked me because I have, Anthony hasn't watched it yet.
Yeah,
my roommate Anthony, and I trust his opinions on film very much so. And he asked what I thought about it. I said like he should definitely watch it. But it's a type of film you have to go in with a very open mind, as opposed to like trying to figure out or like discern anything like particularly like concrete about it. You just have to go in, like ready to like Lon said, to let it wash over you. And like the first viewing needs to be kind of like that really like passive experience, I think.
Passive, yeah.
And then like after that, I think it is more important that it is like more fruitful that you can go back and pick it apart and see that as they're being presented. Going into it though, I think it's hard to say because if from watching the trailer, I definitely had the idea in my mind already that there was something to kind of figure out or like dissect as we're watching it.
Actually,
So like I would be interested in like seeing how someone might watch this if they're going like completely blind.
Yeah.
Like it did not know what to expect from this story.
It's sort of like how I watched Arrival with this knowledge. It's a very Arrival-like way. I watched Arrival having read this story, so I knew what was going to happen, but it didn't really matter because it was more about how it was told, which I guess is sort of like a metaphor for life and the death process and all of it, which is just like, yeah, you can know how this story ends or you can know it ends in this way, but that doesn't make it any less, and in fact, it makes it more beautiful and interesting, and that's why the second rewatch of this film is so much more fruitful than the first, because you're not trying to do the thing where when I saw Eternal Sunshine for the first time and like he woke up and the car was dented, and then I was like, nope, this is not the first. This is something that we're watching things after the events of something take place. Like I immediately grabbed on that. I think I figured out The Sixth Sense from a movie review and watching the trailer. So the moment he was shot, I was like, he's dead. So like I'm one of the people who immediately needs to like crux the puzzle, and this was a real meditation on. No, you don't. Yeah. Or like get over yourself and just let it say what it's trying to say.
Yeah.
So guys, thank you I think that's a pretty good info to just say, just go watch this movie and then please rewatch this movie because it's
talk about it with your friends like this.
Yeah.
Like there's so many people I hope are having this conversation with like their friends about stuff that they were never supposed to talk about with their friends before.
Yeah.
Like I really hope like that's something I hope like a lot of his movies do, disarm these like really personal subjects we're not supposed to talk about with the people we care about.
Well, and speaking of that, I mean, I really want to thank you, Sabrina, first of all, again, for joining us on your birthday, but also for like inspiring me to put this together because there's no one I wanted to talk about this movie with more than you, even though like we don't know each other that well, but like I know you love Eternal Sunshine, which is not my favorite, but I love John Malkovich, and the fact that like after I saw this movie, I was like, Sabrina like that, okay. So like Sabrina really, Sabrina's got some Charlie Kaufman, like some real things to bring to the table in terms of this conversation. You made me excited to watch the movie, and then after I watched it, there's nothing that I wanted to do more than talk to you about it. So thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, I'm so happy, honestly, that you like created this whole stream because I was joking. I was like, let's all find a park and talk about it, but I was like kind of serious. I'm like, let's all sit 6 feet apart in like an open field and then just like yell at each other about the movie from feet away. But I mean, this is a lot easier. So I can't imagine spending my birthday any other way. I love this film. It's easily my favorite of the year.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always down to talk about this.
There's nothing that's going to
buy up. Like,
there's nothing that's there is nothing that 2020 can bring us that is going to be better than this film. I mean, it's going to be in terms of Palm Springs was great. There's been some really good stuff. I know you might disagree and Lon might disagree, but there's nothing to me that's going to be better and more emotionally resonant and more impactful and powerful and with a stronger message about not being alone, even if we feel alone in this film.
The only other thing I've seen this year that had this kind of an impact on me is a Brazilian film. It's called An Invisible Life. It's on Amazon Prime. It's about two sisters in 50s Rio whose parents separate them and they spend decades searching for one another and trying to meet back up. It is incredible. Watch that, but also this. Those are the two 2020 achievements in my mind.
Oh, well, but also remember, everyone should watch Baskin, which is available to rent on Amazon.
Not from 2020, but is a Turkish horror movie that will mess you up.
It will mess you up real good.
I saw your tweets about it, and I wanted to check it out.
That's also on Amazon
Prime,
I believe.
It's on Prime, but you can rent it. But it's the tagline is 5 cops go to hell, and that's all I'll say about it. Yeah. But it is incredible. It is the most messed up movie. Yeah, but more or less. So I guess we'll go around and say where we can find each other. But we all kind of know. But like, yeah, Aaron, what can I do?
So Feature Presentation Productions, Tony is who runs that channel. He's been in the chat. Chico's my dog. Who makes a lot of barking on stream. I've had to mute a couple times. And if you see me muted, going to the side yelling, that was me trying to keep Chico from barking.
He's just like shaking his head back and forth. He's been pretty good. I mean, it's 2 hour stream here. So, I'm always over there, Feature Presentation Productions. Next Tuesday, we're finishing up my birthday stream from June of all of my favorite movies from all the years I've been alive. So, we're finishing up 2017 through 2020. Finally next Tuesday. So if you are available, anybody, that's a complete open invite, including in the chat, just message me or talk to me. But we're doing 2017 through 2020. You can pop in for a couple of years if you only got like 30 minutes or whatever. So we all talk a lot. So if you're all welcome on. But after this, we're going to be going back in time. We're going to be doing best movies of the 80s and 70s also. So I love this thing. I think those are such interesting years because that's like my those are like those defining years. That's my post-divorce living in LA years. I'm not like movies changed to me after that.
Yeah, and these are 3 hour streams that Tony has put on. Tony's worked really hard at his channel. He also has fantasy film fights every Wednesday, which was recording during this today. So I told Tony, I apologize, but every Wednesday we have a different subject where five different panelists choose 5 different movies. Like this week, it was best movies directed by James. So any James director, you choose your 5 movies. Yeah. So, and it's just like a really cool chance for people from the family communities so Feature Presentation Productions, all of that stuff. They have trivia every Sunday also where they put together random teams. So if you're having trouble in some of these other fan leagues getting trivia matches, go over to Feature Presentation Productions. We literally they are the land of misfit toys. That's why I'm over there. I find those are my people. And so
like me and Twitch sings, like me and the weirdos over Twitch sings. I just want to say too, Aaron, thank you so much for joining us. You really have been missed, and I'm really glad to see you back. And also on Tuesday, can't do too long because you're going to be on Cinema Bias. So
yeah, Cinema Bias is next Tuesday. So after the stream, we'll be on Cinema Bias next Tuesday with Drew and Alex. I'll be joining them and giving my thoughts on a particular movie. I'm not going to reveal it yet, but anyways, wait, is it Beverly Hills Cop?
Yeah.
All right, excellent. The heat is on.
Yes.
One of my favorite. So yeah, thank you again. Last thank you to everybody. Seriously, I mean, there is no reason that I should have been on this stream, and it's just one of these things that I love about you, Drew, is that you've never made me feel like anybody but an equal. So it's been a pleasure getting to know all of you, and you guys are truly some of my best friends, as I said in my tweet. The best movie of 2020, some of the best people I know in 2020. So this exceeded my expectations, like the movie.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, the only thing I feel like that can make this better is like if my dad, who loves pop culture and stuff, would have like been on the stream too, because like my dad would have loved this movie. Not to be all over about that, but the silver lining, so to speak, is I do think that like there are these people that I've met through this internet doing stuff, and you are one of them, Aaron, who I now consider like some of my like closest friends, and so it's
true.
Really
like seriously, like I've told you about my mom and things that are going on. I don't tell people I don't care about my mom. Lon, same with you, Sabrina. Like all of you, like are some of the only people who've really known what's going on. So I really do mean it from the bottom of my heart. I do love you guys, and I love this movie, and I love talking about this. And like honestly, like when I tweeted out, I was like including on this conversation. I was like, this maybe will get a like, probably not, and then it will like be not. And it's just like I don't know. This was awesome. It was like the highlight of my day.
I will say if it had been anyone else, I probably would have been like,
I believe that. I believe that. And again, happy birthday to Sabrina. I got to be with her on her birthday at midnight when it happened, virtually, of course. But and just like this conversation, and you know, the fact that the word is spreading, that people when they see a great movie like this are like, I need to talk to Sabrina about this. I'm glad that the word's spreading here, because people need to fucking know this. So, sorry.
Speaking of, I don't know where to find Sabrina necessarily at midnight on a stream. So, Sabrina, where can we find you? And like, where are you giving your thoughts, your hot takes, and your spicy opinions?
Spicy. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at SabrinaXMonica, Twitter at SabrinaOnFilm, and then Patreon.com/SabrinaOnFilm. That's where we did the stream that Aaron's talking about, the Eternal Sunshine Watch Along. You could subscribe to the First Cut channel with me, Andres Cabrera, and Robert Butler III. We have the Meaning of podcast. We have our live stream actually in about 40 minutes. So we have like a birthday live stream. So if you want to check that out. Yeah, so if you guys want to check that out, go to the First Cut YouTube channel. I'm super excited. Thank you guys. Thank you, Lon. Thank you, Aaron, Eric, Andrew. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for joining us. I will say, between you and Andres repping the Vast of Night, I gotta say the First Cut people are like giving me my best 2020 recs for movies. So like everyone should definitely check that out. What about you, Lon? Where can we find you besides probably over here?
Just hanging out on that couch, or on my Twitter at LONS. That's where I post everything I'm working on. That's the best place to find me.
And Eric.
Eric.
Yeah. You can find me at NerdChronic on all social media places. Also editing for the movie Trivia Schmoedown, which we're still in the swing of very heavily right now for the next month. And also doing VideoChronic pop culture quizzes, which is what we do every Monday, Thursday here on this channel. Tomorrow is a big one, monster, no pun intended, the big one, Monsterverse quiz with Alexander Robinson, Godzilla 2014, Kong Skull Island, and Godzilla King of the Monsters.
We're doing the Standing Up Lizard trilogy.
Yeah. And then Monday, we just kind of booked that, which will be a fun one. We have Tangled with Abby Friel, Robert Parker, and Jill Marie from Center Point of View podcast.
So we're doing that. Yeah, I mean, you've been killing it with the promos and stuff. I can't wait for you. Like, I would love to see you do I would love to just pay money on a Patreon to watch you do a watch along to I'm Thinking of Ending Things and just give us like your editor take of it, because my God, like it blew my
That
mind.
was so cool hearing him just like, because Eric has a way of like separating his emotions, unlike me, as he's speaking. So he's like was able to like deconstruct this, like just the structure of the scene while like eliminating the emotions, just to be like, this is why it worked so well and made you feel like.
Because we love watching movies together, but it's hard because we are just kind of also in real time giving our opinions about the movie. I can go back and watch the same scene, and then it's like, oh wait, she's wearing glasses. They're glasses. Suddenly he's standing 4 feet. Suddenly he's standing 1 feet. And blah, blah. And that's just like not how, even by myself, I absorb film. So it's always really cool to see like a perspective that's like from a technical point of view. So there you go. Thing. I, by the way, am Video Drew from the movie Trivia Schmoedown, but also from elsewhere. Like you can find me on this channel. Please like and subscribe. You can join the Patreon. We do a lot of fun stuff. Tomorrow we're having the Godzilla thing. Monday, Thursday, pop culture quiz at 9 p.m. over here. Tuesdays it's Cinema Bias, which you heard about. That's me and Alex Mack filling each other's blind spots. Tomorrow is Thursday. That's Thursday. Friday, Twitch Sings, which is video karaoke. Twitch Sings is around till January, guys, and we're going to make the most out of it. It's really fun. I'm not even a karaoke person. It's so much fun. So definitely check it out. I also am probably going to be doing more with Twitch because I just got my PS4 set up. So we will be probably just doing like live streams and stuff and improv things. Sunday, it's Live in the Dark with VideoDREW, which is like Between Two Ferns meets Space Ghost. It is my in kayfabe show. We've had some awesome guests. Lon's been helping out on it. It's been so much fun, and we're looking forward to where this weird, wacky world is going to take us next. So I guess that's it for us, guys. Thank you for joining us on this sort of like impromptu, random thing, but this is the kind of thing where it's important to me. Very rarely is like something that important to me, and I really wanted to discuss it. So thank you guys all for joining me. You guys are all my best friends, and I love you all very much.
It was a pleasure.
There's no outro music, so I'll just say thank you to everybody, and then love you all, and take care of yourselves, and watch this movie again. It's beautiful. Goodbye, guys.